Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, May 28th, 2024 regular meeting of the Stoughton School Committee. This meeting is being recorded by SMAC for future broadcasting. Please rise if you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on our agenda is the public hearing for school choice. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing for school choice? All right, the motion was made by Lindsay. A second?
Second.
Seconded by Chris. The motion has been moved and seconded. A roll call vote.
Aye.
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 All right. The motion is carried 5-0. The public hearing opened at 7:05 p.m. The public hearing is an opportunity for residents and all interested persons to comment on the subject of school choice. The public hearing is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between individuals and the school committee. Do we have anyone here signed up for the public hearing? Dr. Beda, can you please explain what we mean by school choice and provide your recommendation?
Yes, according to an amendment in the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 76, subsection 12B, the Stoughton School Committee, like all school committees, must vote each year regarding the option to participate in school choice. It is my recommendation to continue as we have in the past, to not participate in the program for the 24-25 school year due to a lack of space in our facilities.
Thank you. And by school choice, we mean students from other districts enrolling in Stoughton. This is not getting to choose which elementary school you go to. This is not, if you're a Stoughton resident, getting to choose to go to another school district that participates in school choice. It is simply residents of other districts asking to come to Stoughton schools and enrolling. Does anybody have any questions or comments about school choice? All right. Can I have a motion to continue to not participate in the school choice program for the 2024-2025 school year? All right. That motion was made by Chris. A second?
Second.
The motion was seconded by Armando. The motion has been moved and seconded. Any last debate or yes?
Is this time sensitive for us to vote on tonight, or would it make sense to wait until June to vote so folks have time to reach out with questions or comment?
We need to and to tell the Department of DESE by June 1st. So
okay.
Next year, we usually do it a little bit earlier in May, but due to town meeting and this postponement. But this is a yearly thing. We do this every year at this time. So,
Okay. Thank you.
yes, for next year, perhaps we can
Yeah.
put this on the agenda earlier. Any other comments, questions, debate? All right, the motion's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All right, the motion is carried 5-0. And so, Dr. Beda, can we make sure that we notify as we need to for June 1st?
Will do.
And then can I have a motion to close the public hearing for school choice and return to the public meeting?
So moved.
All right, we'll give that to Chris.
Second.
Seconded by Lindsay. It's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote.
Aye.
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 All right, that motion is carried 5-0. The public hearing is closed at 7:08 p.m. And that brings us to public comment. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment? Yes, yes. All right. Public comment portion of the meeting shall not exceed 15 minutes. Citizens of the district will be allowed up to 3 minutes to make their statement and must begin their comments by stating their name and address. So if you would like to begin.
Do I need to push this?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. Thanks for the time. My name's David Walsh, 52 Central Street. I wanted to talk to you about a program on SMAC that we're producing called Stoughton's Got Talent. I don't know if anybody's heard about it, but it's a program open to people of all ages. I think it'd be great if we get some students. I've actually heard from some students so far, so I think some have gotten the word. But it's basically, if you remember community auditions, an opportunity to be able to get up. I don't want this to be a competition kind of thing, as some of the TV things that I've been like, but this one here is open. Give students an opportunity to be able to perform, whether they sing, dance, ventriloquist, comic, whatever talent they want to show. It'd be an opportunity to do that on SMAC. So we're working to produce the show and looking for participants, and figured it'd be an opportunity to get it in front of the public at a school committee meeting. I talked to Dr. and he thought it'd be a good idea as well. And I think I mentioned it to Lindsay as well. So that's basically it. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I did want to get it into a public forum so that people have the opportunity to come forward as participants.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. Yep. That's great. Don't worry about that. All right. Moving on to the superintendent update. Thank you. Yep.
Anyone else for comment?
Anyone else for public comment? Nope. All right. Moving on.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Sorry, I've been informed that the people that are remoting in have no sound. So I
Oh,
just
okay.
wanted to alert you to that.
All right. If we could have tech. All right. Yes, we have
My
a.
apologies.
Yes, that's okay. All right. Good to know before we get to the presentation. While we're working on that, Dr. Baida, can you provide the superintendent update? Thank you.
Within your packet this evening. Within your packet this evening, under the, my comments, we have a letter dated May 2nd from our, Mr. Clark, our Director of Special Education, that he had been notified that the district was informed that we have successfully completed the corrective action plan that was assigned by DESE after the tiered focus monitoring from the spring of '23. As you recall, I reviewed the 6 areas of partial compliance with the committee on October 10th of '23. He'd like to thank the efforts of school-based and central administration staff. The district has been notified that we are receiving a full compliance in the targeted areas and no further action is required at this time. So it's a good thing. I'd like to congratulate the 69 juniors and seniors for being inducted into the Stoughton High School National Honor Society. I had a great time getting there and saying a few words. It was a great night. It's always great to celebrate students and families and staff. I'd like to thank the town meeting member for supporting the school district. I know we still have some more town meeting nights, or at least one coming up, but I'd just like to take the public opportunity to do that. You will be receiving a request for negotiations with the para unit for the purposes of hall monitors. And so I believe Mr. Barboza has been. So there'll be a timeline coming. I've asked Mr. Emerson to give us a timeline on when that needs to start. You have the organizational chart that will be part of the next meeting as well. And lastly, we're starting to take a look at Stoughton Academy in terms of what we're offering, extending it, looking at it from all different sizes. Of course, you will all be involved in this because it is a school committee authorization requirement by law. So over the next, I would say probably 9 to 18 months, we're going to be giving you some information about innovation, early college dropout prevention, career readiness, getting adults, students to come back and take their MCAS test. And actually, they've passed the Stoughton High School requirements, but they maybe need the MCAS test to get their diploma, all of that stuff. So you'll be seeing a lot of updates on that over the next few months. And that is all I have at this time.
I have one question. I'm going to ask about the EV chargers. What is the latest on that?
Yes, it is with the company, and it's a process. It's there. We just talked about it last week. We sent the notice to the vendor. They were physically here. It's just taking a lot longer than it needs to. But we're trying. Same thing with a couple of other things that you know about that we're just way too far behind. We have to put some. So I'm now meeting with Dennis and Joyce on a weekly basis and just basically saying, I need this, when is this going to happen? Today, we did get for Mr. Armando Barboza's comments about stuff for graduation. We met with the company. We were supposed to have it cleaned out last week. There was a no-show last week. Another email went out today. They assure us that they're going to be here Thursday. So that's what we're hoping for. That and the EV chargers.
Anyone else have questions or comments for the superintendent?
Just
All right.
exciting to see that we're in compliance with the tiered focus monitoring. I know, congratulations to Mr. Clark and all his staff on that. That's exciting.
I agree. That's good progress. I appreciate seeing that. Thank you for the update there.
And just, sorry, one more
go
thing,
ahead.
just wanted to reiterate Dr. Bayetta's thanks to the town meeting for supporting the budget and the articles that we brought forward this year. I'm excited that we can move forward with those.
I'll speak more about that in the budget, but again, yes, thank you to town meeting. Really appreciate that. We have Max Pokraka here for the Student Advisory Committee representative update. Do you have anything for us tonight?
Yeah, so school is almost done, so we're starting to prepare for finals, which will take place I think 2 weeks. And then spring sports, we're just wrapping up, so I think track like finished this weekend, and everything's starting to wrap up. There's prom, I believe is this Friday, and other senior events as well as graduation, and then math MCAS took place last week for sophomores, and it went pretty well.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Yeah, and give our thanks to the Student Advisory Committee for their work all this year with us. We really appreciate. I know you guys have met with us. We still have some things that we need to follow up from our meetings with you, but really appreciate all the information that you and Morgan Gropey and I'm forgetting your name. Angie, yes. Angie is also, really appreciate all the work that you've done. So thank you very much for coming to our meetings and sitting through them. Any other questions or comments for? Yes.
Anything you can see that we need to do, prepare for the big graduation day?
Mike.
Oh, sorry. Are there any comments or anything we can do to prepare for graduation that the student body have seen?
I don't think we really like talked about that, but I just hope it's like a nice day so it can be like outside.
We'll cross all our toes and fingers for nice weather. All right. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is a very exciting one. This is the Mass Certificate of Academic Excellence, and I would like to bring up Ms. Miller to present the award. Or are you, or Dr. Maeda?
We're going to co-op this one.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. So, I'd like to introduce to you Adil Kand, class of 2024, who is a dedicated, hardworking, self-motivated student who is a positive contributing member of the Stoughton community. Adil is in the top 1% of his graduating class. As a senior, he is taking AP US Government and Politics, AP Physics, AP Computer Science Principles, AP Statistics, and is studying independently for additional AP exams. Or was, because they're over now, right? He's also taking a handful of honors classes. Adil has committed to Georgia Tech, and he plans on studying computer science. Outside of the classroom, Adil is highly involved. In his freshman and sophomore years, he was the class president and has been serving as student council representative since his junior year. Adil was a member of our soccer and swim team for all 4 years, serving as swim captain for his last 2 seasons. He is currently playing, or was currently playing, in his 4th tennis season for the Black Knights and was serving as captain this year. Additionally, Adil has been a part of DECA for 3 years, participating in the financial team decision-making category and becoming co-president during his senior year. Adil has been a member of the Recycling Club and National Honor Society since 11th grade. In the larger community, Adil has been in Boy Scouts since 1st grade and achieved the highest rank of Eagle Scout by making 2 historical signs at Glen Echo. Pleased to introduce you to Adil Kant.
Wow.
It's the highest award that the Superintendent's Association gives out to a student every single year, so congratulations. And what are they, the Yellow Jackets?
Yellow Jackets.
Yellow Jackets, Georgia Tech. I'll be rooting them on as well. Congratulations. I don't know how you did all of that, but good for you. Yeah. Parents are more important than the superintendent, believe me.
He squeezed in the Eagle Scout on his free time.
Yes. I don't know how we
The
did
signs of the Glen Echo, really helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
Congratulations again.
Should we get one with the superintendent?
Yep. Yep. That's going to be the next one.
Okay.
We're going to take you with the school committee too.
Actually, let's
Do you want to just, yeah, we'll come to you. Yeah. We'll go to.
pause for the meeting for a minute. Oh, watch out for the pitfalls.
And one more. Great.
Congratulations. My husband actually did his master's at Georgia Tech for computer science, so good program. Good hands.
And you don't have to stay.
Thank you. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Yes.
I would like to recognize the family as they're leaving, just to say, I know behind every motivated student, there's always a very supportive network, so congratulations to the family.
He was like, I didn't have to do anything.
Oh, yeah, I know you drove him places. Come on now.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
All right. Next, we have a donation from the McGuire family for the Stoughton Public Schools drama program. Do we want to read the letter or? All right. Okay. I may need tissues if I'm going to read this aloud. So Mrs. McGuire, the person who donated this, wanted us to read aloud the letter that she sent in with the donation. She said, "This letter of appreciation is long overdue, and in light of it being budget season, I want to voice how important the school system is to families like mine. I hope that the school committee reads this letter at the next meeting. In 2013, my family moved to Stoughton because of its proximity to Boston for work and the quality of education for our kids. We wanted to be a part of a well-rounded, diverse community with lots of opportunities for the children. Once again, we are hearing about budget cuts. The school system is the foundation of this town. In the fall of 2019, my husband, my children's father, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer stage 4. Soon after, we all had to learn to navigate life, not only with this diagnosis, but with COVID. The amount of support we received from the school system was incredible. When he passed in 2021, we were overwhelmed with the amount of people who came to his funeral in Boston, from school committee members to teachers and the acting superintendent, Jonathan Ford. This meant the world to us. In the fall of 2021, things were going back to normal. The girls and I were still in shock, trying to convince a 7th grader that going to school every day after they had lost their dad and was able to do online school was difficult, to say the least. Once again, the guidance department, the principal, Mr. Colantonio, teachers, and the Bright program did everything they could to help a grieving child. Then one day, my daughter came home from school excited. She started a drama class with Mr. H. He did not know at that time that she had lost her beloved dad. She was learning new things and was finally invested in something again. The drama department helped her flourish in the last few years, meeting new people, creating stronger friendships, and having a mentor, Mr. H. I once read that the biggest predicting factor of a child moving forward in a healthy way from trauma is to have someone who believes in them. Mr. H believes in her and the kids of Stoughton. We see this in the increased quality of the plays and the huge amount of time he puts into his work. Extracurricular activities need to be a permanent part of students' educational experience. Not everyone is a classroom learner. School is so much more than memorizing information or passing tests. Without this department, I strongly feel like my daughter's grieving process would have been halted. As we know, grief is always there, a low hum. Having a positive outlet makes a huge difference. I'm proud of the work that the Stoughton school system has been doing to keep progressing forward. I'm grateful that my children have the opportunity to participate in the drama department. I hope that every child has the same opportunities and access to creative supports like mine have. With that, I am honored to make this donation to be used at Kevin Halleck's discretion and hope even more classes like this are offered. Sincerely, a very grateful mom, Eileen McGuire, parent, resident, and Precinct 5 town meeting rep. So, thank you very much for this donation. It is school committee policy that we must accept donations like this, and so I would like a motion to accept this donation from the family for the drama program.
Just ask a question
Sure.
first, really
Yes.
quickly. I think, so first of all, I think this is just really beautiful, and I appreciate that Ms. McGuire shared her story and the impact that the drama program had. I do want to ask, just because of the way it's worded, about the donation being spent at the discretion of Mr. Halleck, like fully trusting that everybody has like the best intentions of how to do that, but that's like logistically a little different from what we've seen before with donations, so I just wanted to get clear on like what the structures are for something like that that's worded like that.
Yes, so that's a great question, thanks for asking it. And thank you to the family for their support of our drama program and the arts. So the way this should work is that Mr. Halleck would work with the principal of the building in what he believes is the best need and provide the rationale for it. It would go through that process and be signed off by the building principal. And, you know, discretion can be for a lot of different things. It could be using materials and supplies. It could be utilizing for crafts. I mean, there's so many different things that they can utilize it for, but there will be a process and it will go through the principal's office.
Okay, thank you, that's really helpful. I just, again, like really appreciate it, but just wanted to make sure we have the structures in place to do that. So I'd be happy to make a motion to accept the SBS drama program donation from the McGuire family.
All right, so the motion was made by Lindsay. A second?
Second.
It was seconded by Chris. Any other comments, debates, questions? All right, it's been moved and seconded. A vote, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, the motion is carried 5-0. Thank you very much to the McGuire family for this generous donation. I really appreciate it. Again, very sorry for your loss, but a beautiful way to kind of honor moving forward. Sorry. Next item on the agenda is a celebratory one. It's the appointment of the Jones Early Childhood Center Director. Dr. Bader, would you like to introduce Ms. Veloso?
I would. Ms. Veloso, if you'd come up. So before you this evening, it's my pleasure that I bring our new director of the Jones Preschool here before you. You can have a seat. You can get relaxed. Nicole Veloso began her teaching career as a teacher for the TLC1 program, where I worked for 10 years teaching children, where she worked with children for 10 years on the autism spectrum, as well as students with a variety of significant needs. After the TLC1 classroom, she transitioned to a teacher as a lead teacher in an integrated classroom. Prior to her time in Stoughton, she worked at the New England Center for Children, where I served as a teacher of children with autism. As you can see from just all of this experience, she brings a world of experience to the Jones School, being part of it through the years. She has a solid reputation as an educational leader. The number of parents that have reached out to me about this appointment has been very supportive, so thank you for that. And so we have a 3-year contract that we've agreed to, and she starts on July 1st. So not much of a breather to go from, so she's going to get used to doing all that. And you have her resume in front of you in terms of her education, her experience, and so forth. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Just welcome to the leadership team. Excited to have you. Congratulations.
Thank you, I'm excited to be here.
Congratulations. All right.
What's great about her is she's now on that side of the table.
We'll miss you in negotiations.
She was part of negotiations for Uniday, so we get her on this side of the table now. It's great. Thanks, Nicole.
All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is the elementary school building project update. The elementary school building project passed at town meeting on May 6th and will go before all of the registered voters of the town on Tuesday, June 11th in a special election. I'd like to thank the project team, especially the building committee chair, TJ Recupero, Carl Franceschi and Courtney Southwick of DRA, Tim Bonfade, Chin Lin, and Eric Rubin of Vertex, and Dr. Baeta for presenting the project to town meeting, as well as our most recent community forums on May 21st, which are now available for viewing on SMAC and the elementary school project webpage. I'd also like to thank the select board for their vote on May 7th to authorize the special election, and town hall, especially the office of the town clerk, for making the special election happen. Thank you to everyone who's asked questions and offered feedback and comments on the project so far, and we're very grateful to the town meeting members who supported moving the project to its next step. I've asked the elementary school building project team to come tonight to explain their updated tax impact to us and to answer any questions the school committee may have before the special election. So I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Recupero whenever you're ready, TJ.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to your members in the audience. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
We're good.
Thank you. So we have been since the fall submitting an estimate. Oh, great. Sorry. Let me try that again. Sorry. Google doesn't like me.
Sorry, hold for technical difficulties.
Let me try Carl. Just the window. How about this?
There we go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Carl, can you flip to the next slide? first of all, and I think they happened pretty much around the same time, because I have been checking DOR's website pretty regularly, and they updated the numbers fiscal year 2024 pretty recently. Additionally, about 7 days, April 30th, so about a week before town meeting, the town had a public meeting with its financial advisor, Hilltop Securities, and Hilltop had run a more accurate estimate of the impact for the taxpayer based on a formula factoring current borrowing rate, current climate, and you know, I actually sent an email to the town accountant just to confirm that this was an estimate, you know, foundational components that went into it, and that came out to an estimated tax impact of 61 cents per $1,000 of property valuation. So what we initially had estimated back in the fall was based on an average home price in the town of Stoughton of about $475,000. And for our project, we estimated high because we had nothing. We were doing it ourselves. We didn't want to come in low and have someone accuse us of gaming numbers, so we estimated high. We came in at about $400 per taxpayer based on a borrowing scheme that we ourselves choose. Let me take the blame off for everyone else that I chose. I select 20-year calculation. So now that we had real numbers right before town meeting, we could calculate it down to a more accurate estimate. So based on 61 cents per $1,000 factor that Hilltop Securities provided the town, and with the additional new numbers on the average home value from DOR of $524,466, which you see on your screen, we updated the numbers so that we're producing the most accurate information for the taxpayers. That gives the average taxpayer an impact of $318 per year, and that would amount to an increase of 4.79%. So all that makes sense? Can I also, Madam Chair, can I also say, I have seen a flyer that was stuck on my front door that said that there was a 6.4% increase from this project. That was using, I think, Hilltop Securities' estimate based on the numbers that we were using a year ago. So it's a combination of two flawed numbers now, or at least one flawed number, reaching a 6.4% increase, which is not correct. It's 4.79, and it's an estimate, and always will be, but that's about as accurate as anybody can get.
Thank you. Are you ready for questions from the committee, or would you like to continue?
We welcome questions. Carl Franceschi is here. Courtney Southwick also. I think Tim Bonfatti, if he's not online, might be on the phone also.
Does anybody have questions? I know I have a few that I've gotten from the public. Lindsay, do you have a question?
Yeah, so I have a comment and then a question. So first I wanted to say thank you for putting the tax calculator together. I actually plugged my home's assessed value into that, and the number was much lower than what I was expecting, which was a nice surprise. I don't have a very new house or a very large house, so like your mileage may vary, but that was a very helpful tool I found. So thank you for that. And then I also just had a quick question. Something I've been hearing from folks that is connected to what's on the slide that's up right now, or that was just up, sorry, with the guaranteed funding from the MSBA. I just wanted to get clarity on that because I think there is a misunderstanding that the MSBA doesn't guarantee the funding for their share of the project. So just wanted to see if you could speak to that a little bit and how that works, just to clarify, I think, a misunderstanding that's out there.
I can answer that, or Carl, if you want to, I'd be happy to.
I can start, TJ. The MSBA gets its funding from the sales tax, as many of you know. And before they invite a community into the pipeline for a project, they in essence earmark a certain amount of their funds for that project, well in advance of the project. And then when we get to this stage where the town has committed to do the feasibility study, has been reimbursed for their portion of that, but has now reached the schematic design submission where a project funding agreement can be signed between the town and the MSBA. That's, I guess in political terms, as close to a guarantee as you get. It is a pay-as-you-go system, but the money is there. The meaning that it's the 47 million is not quote-unquote guaranteed means you might not need 47 million. This, like the high school, came in under budget, so you never reached the maximum grant that Stoughton was entitled to, so to speak, there. And, you know, the same could happen here. If the change orders are few and there are no changes in scope, you may not need all 47 million. But if you do expend all the way up to the 114 million project cost, and MSBA has committed the 47 million to reimburse the town. So, as I say, I think in political terms, that's as close to a guarantee as you get. And we've been doing this ever since the MSBA was formed. We are not aware. I'm pretty, with high degree of probability, can say that there's never been a project that hasn't been funded once it's been approved, like Stoughton has been approved here.
Awesome. Can I just add that I have seen the agreement? It just came right as I was trying to finish dinner, so the agreement exists. I will be signing it shortly, so that it lays out pretty clearly what the town is going to receive as a part of that. It asks that it be reviewed by the town's legal counsel, so it's very thorough and it is pretty binding that the MSBA will have that money, to us. So it's not. It's not like the Chapter 70 funding where numbers just seem to float around. It's actually quite clearly laid out on a piece of paper that will be signed.
Thank you.
And
That's
it
really
is fixed. It does not depend on a vote each year on the budget or anything like that. Your reimbursement rate is fixed and embedded in that project funding agreement and so forth. So it's not going to vary going forward.
awesome. Thank you, Carl.
Anyone else have questions, comments? Armando?
I have some questions, but several, so if anyone else has questions before me, it'd be great.
Go ahead.
Okay, I got questions from neighbors and people just stopping me in the street. One of it is that, will the proposed elementary school look or feel like a vacation resort in Florida?
I know you want to answer that, TJ.
I'm not sure what that's referring to. The building is meant to satisfy the educational program and fit into the context of Stoughton and its setting, on this particular site. There is a requirement for a building to last 50 years in the MSBA program. Your current schools have all lasted that long. So that's clearly what's in the future. So we want to obviously choose materials and systems that are durable, low operating costs, low maintenance costs, and so forth. So, but in no way does that make it, luxurious or gold-plated or anything like that.
It's a school.
It's a school that's consistent with other schools being built. Not that it looks like some other school necessarily in terms of the aesthetics, but in terms of the materials and the budget, it is very comparable to other elementary schools being proposed and being constructed right now in Massachusetts.
Another question is, this is a dual school, two schools in one. And I was wondering if you can give us an estimate or some numbers as to how much or how less it would cost to build one school as opposed to building two schools, short-term and long-term, including finding a site or demolishing one, which may require modules to put the kids in before moving them in. Just a general, how much it would cost what we're doing now compared to what some of the suggestions have been, building two smaller schools?
Well, there's certainly an economy of scale, building, a school in the range that this one is of 600 students or so. As has been mentioned, there's just one gym, there's just one library, there's just one kitchen, one cafeteria, one stage music room, so just the building itself, if you were to basically, divide this in half and build two 300 pupil schools, the size of those buildings would probably be in the vicinity of at least 15, perhaps 20% bigger than this one school is in terms of square footage. And square footage translates into dollars pretty directly. So just with those major, spaces not needing to be duplicated, that's the, economy of scale on the building side. And then likewise, there's an economy of scale on site development. We're bringing in one sewer line, one water line, one new roadway. You'd have to, again, duplicate that in another site for another project. So there's likewise economies of scale in the site work too. So and then of course, I don't know if you want to consider the present value of money or whatever, but if you're doing one school now and then one school in the future, that second school is going to be affected by escalation compared to today's dollars.
Can I answer that, Carl? So and please, Carl, correct me if I mistake this, but I've gone through MSBA's recent projects and we studied it on the building committee, and the average school these days is 630 student school, K-5 school. So it's difficult for you to find a comparison for what you say is one school. I'm assuming means the 225 student design capacity that MSB allowed us on the low end versus the 515 they allowed us on the high end. The smallest school you'll find over the last several years is, I think, Randolph at 315 students. And that's our current capacity at the South School as of like last week. So when you say one school versus two schools, first of all, it's difficult to find the one school to compare what we need to build and cost-wise. And second of all, the average school these days is, I think I'm saying the same thing twice, is 630 students. So we're still below the average.
Okay, thank you. Another question, it concerns repairing the existing school. A lot of folks still asking the question, why don't we just repair the school that we have now? And of course, looking at all these things, replacement of the roof, the electrical system, the plumbing system, installing a modern security system, rectification of the playground hazards, heating system upgrades, additional facilities, space needed to accommodate special education, and so on, provisions for adequate space and furniture, solutions to fix the current traffic problem. And of course, a lot of people are confused about the ADA kick in after you do certain repair, which will require you to do additional repair. That's really confusing. If someone can just give us a fourth grade level explanation how that kicks in and how that cost can be substantially more than what people are thinking about.
Well, we actually did that as part of the feasibility study, look at what's called base repairs to fix things that are broken or that things that don't meet current standards or current codes. Those pure construction costs, just identifying those elements, was north of $30 million. Then you have to figure all the soft costs to make that happen, renting portable classrooms, because you have to vacate the building at least a wing at a time to do the scope of work that, to do all new electrical, mechanical, sprinklers, light fixtures, finishes, and the ADA, upgrades of trying to resolve the many ramps and levels in that building, it is extensive. And so, and trying to pick these things off one at a time and capital repairs, the basic code principle that's in effect here is if during any 3-year window of time you spend more than 30% of the assessed value of the building, then you need to bring the entire building up to code, as one sort of project. So you can't even spread out these costs over 10 years or something like that, because any major project, the roof and say the windows, those two alone probably will trip the 30% threshold right there. And so you're into doing all the toilet rooms, all the ramps, all the accessibilities, every entrance into the classroom, and you're necessarily going to be affecting all the systems in the building. So it's a realistic number that we had 2 independent cost estimators looking at who understand the cost of these systems and materials these days, and that's where it fell. We never got down to the detailed level of exactly how it would be done, how many months it would take, how many summers and years, and how many modular classrooms exactly. But certainly, if this vote failed, the town would have to go back to the drawing board and kind of think about that exact issue about how does this building get renovated if that's the only choice moving ahead.
Thank you. One of the aspects, actually, we had a previous superintendent here some months ago, and I was able to get an opportunity to speak with her. And one of the questions I asked, what would happen if the vote fails? What happens to MSBA? And the implication I got is that the MSBA may never, ever come back to Stoughton to fund any schools in the future. I know that's probably not their policy, but that's the indication I got from the superintendent. I was wondering if Dr. Bader can talk a little bit about that and what his thoughts are.
Yeah, so, I mean, my history with the MSBA goes back to 2008-9, in an effort to move forward a building which took 2 years. Currently, there's one district which actually our OPM resides in that they had a failed vote, and the process to, quote, come back in is just underway, if you will. There is no policy that says they're never coming back. There's no such written document, but they're spending well into 6 figures worth of people and time and effort on these projects. I mean, one of the most important things about these projects is we have a control agency called the MSBA who invites you in after you write your statement about your building. Actually, prior to that, they came out to your building and graded it and said, oh, I wonder if this building ever comes forward, are they going to, they're going to want a new building. That's the statement of interest that we did, and that my predecessors did. And then from there, it's a very vetted system. Please go to the MSBA site. Our meetings with the MSBA are on there. They're public meetings where they asked questions about our project. They asked about where it's being built, and by the way, do you have the opportunity to add to the building if your enrollment increased down the road? And why do you need, they have very specific, detailed square footage for what a classroom looks like. And we can try to do some pushing back. For example, I believe this is true, and TJ, correct me, the gymnasium, we wanted to make it a little bit bigger than your traditional sized elementary gymnasium because of the sense of community and the use of community that we have with the town, not only athletics, but also other activities. So you follow a very vetted system. If you get to the end and the answer is no, you do restart the whole process. You can't just take the old approved plans and say, oh, here you go. You're looking at the whole process. And the phrase back of the line might be the wrong phrase, but there are a ton of communities right now. We just went to a meeting with the MSBA for the approval, where there's a ton of communities that are coming into the system as we speak. And by the way, they already have other lists. I mean, the statement, the SOI statement will be available sometime between January and second week of March of this coming year. There'll be a whole other group of communities that want to come in. The realization is that you're building a building that's going to last at least 50 years for the amount of students of taking one building offline. So you're taking a significant chance that you can do it out of just borrowing, right? Let's just borrow and then pay back out of operating budgets, to quote some of the folks. That's not sustainable from when you're asking for $30 million and $40 million. And we just did it with a project in town, the fire department, where it was a combination of the borrowing and exclusion. And the fact is that, long-term, you see some of those, some of that impact on loans. For example, how much do you have to actually pay out in loans for 20 years or 30 years that's coming out of operational funds? And long-term, I worked in a community where town halls would be closed for certain days. We'd only have part-time staff in the school department and the offices, all these things that you do because you have to borrow so much money. So it's a big chance. You do get sent to the, quote, back of the line. What that line is, could be 3 years out, 5 years out. It really depends on what the community brings forward that's changed. What they won't do, I guarantee you, is say, hey, would you like to do an accelerated repair? Hey, we'll give you some money for boilers. Hey, we'll give you some money. That is not happening. I can assure any taxpayer in the Commonwealth, including the resident, that will not happen. Because they already have the reports from the pros, reviewed by their pros, that says revamping that building with MSBA money is not something we're willing to do.
Madam Chair? I think that was really well said by the superintendent. I just wanted to add one thing. So I've thought about this a lot because, the Florida resort that someone mentioned, that just runs under my skin 6 ways. So I don't know what people would do different. Carl Franceschi will tell you that this design, while I think it's very attractive, it's also functional in the respect that it maximizes the incorporation of the education plan that MSBA approved, but it also minimizes the amount of non-reimbursable space. So what that means is it does more for us and gets us the most amount of money. So when someone says, you're building Mar-a-Lago, no, we're building a building that is most functional and gets us the most dough from MSBA. And I don't know how someone comes back and does that better. I think they can, go revisit everything that we did. I wish they'd just look at everything we did start to finish and then decide that they could do something different. In this case, it's a wonderful looking building, for sure, but it's functional in so many respects to what your educational purpose is, as well as functional in things like structure, like, the great wooden beams that I love so much in the building, because, that's sort of thing that I go, those are structurals, so they serve a dual purpose. I'm going on too long, but and I think Dr. Baeta said it better than I ever can, but the point is, it's not an elaborate building in the respect that we're incorporating all sorts of nonsense. What we incorporated allows us to take full advantage of the money that we're allowed to get by way of grant, and it also utilizes a space better than we ever could with any other design that the committee looked at for educational purposes.
One other point too, just to give you a couple of experiences in terms of districts that had failed votes and that tried to get back in line. I only know of 2 that actually got back in line, and they were both in the realm of 8 to 10 years from the failed vote to when they started up again. Because, as was said, MSBA is looking for projects to invest in that they, have a high hope of success, too.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have just two more, Madam. Well, this one's be hard to quantify, but I was wondering what the impact would be actually on the children if we were to repair the South School and they had to move into the modules, and of course, we probably cannot have recess because of the hazard, wastes, and construction going on that same site. I don't know if the teachers want to comment on the impact of the children being stuck inside the school, being somehow barricaded or enveloped from the hazards while the construction would be going on in the South School?
Well, I can speak from experience of a high school renovation addition through the MSBA process, so not just using, not using that process. It is, at some point, months upon months of cafeteria being closed. There'd be no auditorium at the same time because it's a cafeterium. You're looking at bathrooms being closed. I've seen the porta potties on site. I've seen the modular classrooms on site. I've seen no, in the high school, no science labs available for a year. I've seen classrooms that the technology can't be used because you got to shut off certain parts of the building. For little children, we're talking kindergartners through 5th grade at the South School. I can't imagine it. I really can't. And I say that as your superintendent, but to be quite honest, if my child was in that grade, I'd be very concerned. And the concern is the amount of soft cost waste to the taxpayers that the project's going to have. We're going to be paying millions of dollars to a third party for modular classrooms. Why do we think that's better than building a building that for 50 years we can look at? To me, it's, and I get it. But I understand if it's difficult for folks to afford it. I understand that, and please do it like Ms. Kreckler did. Go on there and plug in your numbers and say to yourself, does this make more sense to me now than the number I heard before? But recess, with young kids, we'd be very, very careful. The idea could be that we would be moving modulars to the DAR and or the Gibbons. That is probably, because you got to remember, you got to connect to sewer, you got to, or septic system. We have that at the middle school, for those of you who don't know. You're more than likely are going to have AC in those. You need heat. And you now have an open campus, which at the elementary level, I would have a lot of concerns about. Secondary, I'd probably have less concerns, but at the elementary. So your soft costs, the more bodies you're going to have to put out there, is money that we're literally giving to third parties to make millions while we could keep our own money and say, I helped to pay for that.
Okay, thank you. Last question, I promise. Lindsay has used the calculator, and I haven't yet. But one of the questions I've come across is that some people are looking at the market value of their home and using the 4% to calculate their taxes for the year. And I see that the building committee did a great job and went to assessed value, which is a big difference between what market value is and what assessed value is. And I was wondering if someone can explain the difference and talk to it about that, so people are not calculating the tax based upon the market value of their home?
So I can address that, unless anybody wants to step on me, but, so there are two different values. Assessed value is generally considered lower than the market value. Market value is what someone will pay for your property in a robust market, or strike that, in the current market, excuse me. The assessed value is based on what's called full and fair cash value, and that's what someone would pay for a property today if you needed to sell, is I think that's how it's calculated. So that without market forces, the full and fair cash value is generally lower than the market value, but I imagine there's some some occasion where it would be higher. I can't really say. I can say this, though, that if you look over the last year's average value of a home in Stoughton was about $475,000. This year, the average value is $521,000 and change. So over the course of the last year, the assessed value of property has increased about $45,000, $46,000. If you look over the last 6 or 7 years, the time period where the town has been investing in capital projects, the high school, the Park Street Sewer Project, the library, now the fire station, and I name another, but I mean, those are the big ticket items I can think of. You'll look at Stoughton's property values and they have increased significantly. What's interesting, if you drill down to the numbers too, the percentage that taxpayers pay as a percentage of the value of their property, that's decreased. As has the percentage that people pay of their income in real estate taxes has decreased. So what that means is, as the town has been investing in property, in capital projects in the town of Stoughton, property values have been increasing, and they're keeping the benefit of that investment. They're actually paying less as a percentage than they were when we started investing in these projects. I think that says something, and those aren't my numbers, those are DOR's numbers. You can go and pull it yourself, or if anybody wants to email me, I have all the spreadsheets, I'd be happy to send them along. So, I mean, I take from that, people are fair to dispute me on this, that the investing in capital projects like the high school, like the fire station, and certainly like this project, has accrued back to the taxpayer in the form of increased property values, which is, it's real money. People use that for retirement, they use that for college education, they use that for vacations and their own home upgrades. So it's nothing to sneeze at. The cynic would say that when your property value goes up, you pay more taxes on it. But the optimist would say, I'm making money off of these projects because you are.
Thank you.
Okay. Chris, do you have any questions?
Hi, thank you so much again for updating this information. We really appreciate the fact that you are as responsive as you have been to new information coming in and the questions being asked, and making sure the materials are reflective of that. So I appreciate that, and I encourage everyone at home to go in and look at the most recent slide deck to make sure that you have the most updated information possible. I wanted to verify something. I heard you say earlier that the consolidated school plan design that was selected was based on an education plan, and one of the questions I remember hearing from the community is whether or not staff have had an input. Can you just briefly touch on that a little bit in terms of how that's reflective in this design?
Sure. The education plan was written primarily by the principals. There's two principals involved, Wilkins and Stout. And they in turn, gathered input from their staff. They also visited other elementary schools and so forth, so they were well informed as to what they wanted in a new school, and obviously consulted with the superintendents and administration to construct the education plan, which talked about such things as taking a K-5 elementary school and dividing it into a lower school and an upper school so that the children are separated somewhat by age group. This building does that sort of vertically, and it also does it by utilizing the floor plan where each wing of the building, each classroom wing of the building represents a grade. So that for the most part, again, enrollments can vary from year to year sometimes, but generally, the entire first grade can be together, the third grade can be together. They're not just in a long hallway mixing with other kids in other grades. And so the teachers of those students obviously can then collaborate and lesson plan together and so forth. So the building reinforces that with the teacher's room on each floor, for the teachers to collaborate, in grade level, we call them classroom neighborhoods. There was also a lot of attention paid to special needs spaces and the proximity of student services, you might say, to the students. They're not all centrally located, downstairs by the front door. They are distributed so that each classroom neighborhood has both full-size special needs classrooms, some small pull-out spaces where there's a student that needs a little extra help. Immediately adjacent to that classroom, there's a small pull-out space. And then there's also specialists like speech and language and adjustment counselors that are distributed through the building to be closer to the kids as to where they are. So the plan, is directly, related to the education plan in that regard. And then just the third one, that the basic form of the building, with having these wings, it's not just a square rectangle of a box, because it was strongly suggested that we want to define outdoor spaces and make them part of the school. And so by having wings, it sort of encloses those spaces and identifies them. One of them being the main entry, but the others being play areas and outdoor classrooms that are directly, adjacent to the school and therefore incorporated, so to speak, into the curriculum. So those are some of the highlights, but there's numerous. I mean, the education plan is I forget, 75 pages long or something like that, talking about how teaching and learning wants to happen in the building, does reflect all that.
And luckily, we have one of the principals who wrote the educational plan here, so do you have anything to
Yeah.
add, Ms. Monia?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I can answer directly in terms of the involvement from the teachers and the staff. Prior to ever writing the educational plan, we had several focus groups, visioning sessions in which many staff members from both the Wilkins and the South School participated, and they provided us with their feedback that we then used to draft the educational plan, just in its most simple of answers.
Excellent. Thank you both so much for providing that additional layer of context. Few more questions. One, another community member asked in response to the growing student population size at all of the 5 elementary schools, had suggested why not just expand the South and Wilkins? Can you speak to that, please?
Well, there's a couple challenges there. The first is just renovating the existing South to be suitable. We've talked about the challenges with that. Even to make that existing school appropriate for the 260, I forget, it keeps changing. It seems like week to week as how many students are enrolled there. But to renovate that is going to reduce the capacity of the school. But then to expand the footprint, to add space, that is a very tight site. It's hemmed in by the topography, the sloping site. It doesn't have enough parking, doesn't have enough circulation to safely, accommodate parent drop-off and buses. So to try and expand it was a losing battle, frankly. We're adding square footage and taking away from the few site amenities that exist, the playgrounds, the little bit of green space behind the school relatively, and the limited parking. It was a lose-lose kind of situation there, trying to expand the existing building.
Perfect, thank you for that. I noticed in your what happens if Stoughton votes no slide, I don't know if you want to advance to that slide or not, that you talk about fully renovating 2 K through 5 schools would equal the cost of 1 new construction consolidated project. Can you speak to that a little bit more, and are those costs truly equal given the MSBA grant that we would be getting for the new school project?
Yes, I guess the short answer is yes, that they're comparing, not the 114 million, they're comparing Stoughton's share of the cost. So, of the new elementary school, the 66 million that Stoughton would be, required to fund for this project. That the renovation of the two existing schools were each in the realm of $40 million or so. So together, that's $80 million compared to the 66 million for, the one consolidated new school. Those are the numbers being compared. The one sort of asterisk there is, as we've said a few times, the cost to renovate each of the schools is not as well and as fully developed as the plans are for this new school. As was said, we haven't figured out exactly how would we renovate these buildings, where would we put the modulars, how many phases would it take to do it. So it was compared at the conceptual level, but for an order of magnitude cost, it's still valid that if you were to renovate both those buildings, it would exceed Stoughton's portion of the cost of this one school.
So if I understand correctly, the cost of the consolidated building would be less than renovating the two existing elementary schools to the town, and would also alleviate overcrowding issues within the district, which would not be the case if we renovated the two existing elementary schools.
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. Finally, I love that you put this slide together. Can you walk us through the what happens if Stoughton votes no slide and the impact of a no vote?
Sure, I guess I can start. TJ and Superintendent too can join in, but certainly, like we said, the very first thing is that the state funding, that 47 million, is no longer available, and to try and revise the project, come up with a different project, or something like that could take, as we said, 8 to 10 years to get back into the program and get a new grant for a comparable new school. And the need to maintain the existing buildings then, becomes the challenge. You can't just ignore it, so that the vote no is not a vote for zero cost. There'll be significant cost to do that deferred maintenance on the building, particularly on South. And as we just talked about, to address any of the significant issues, the roof and the windows, just to pick two, it is likely to trip the threshold to have to renovate the entire building. And so you're back up to, $35 to $40 million to do the entire project to renovate that building. So that not that it's automatic, but as soon as you try to do something there, you're gonna trip that threshold relatively soon. It doesn't happen the day after the vote, and obligate the town to do that, but certainly, to maintain the parity of facilities throughout the town, something has to be done itself. And as we said, just postponing anything these days, the construction costs will escalate. So if a new study is needed and a new, plan of attack to take on a renovation kind of project, takes another year to plan or something, and then another vote, a year from now or something, costs are going to escalate compared to, what they cost today. So,
Can I add 2 quick points to what Carl said? I don't know if you're finished, Carl.
that's good. I hit the high points. Go ahead.
I wanted to drill down on a couple things that have come up online. One is the concept of deferred maintenance, because it makes it sound like, at least the people who have been responding online, like that term means neglected maintenance, and that's not the correct term. That's not the correct way to look at it. Deferred maintenance, I look at like throwing good money down a black hole, because it makes more sense to look at a new. Actually, it says this in the 2010, and then every update of the facilities master plan. It essentially says, you should be looking at a new building. For perspective, Carl mentioned that just new windows or new interior doors would trigger a full ADA compliance. Just for perspective, that building is assessed at $3.9 million. I just pulled up the estimate for base repair, which Carl told you was formulated by two independent cost estimators who reconciled any differences and came up with one estimate, which isn't even a final estimate, because if we were to do the project, as Carl said, we'd have to do more hard planning and hard design. But just the window systems alone, 40%, as I read this, is $1.6 million just to do the windows. Now, maybe that qualifies under the accelerated repair program of MSBA. Doesn't matter. It's over the 30% threshold. That means you, Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, this is, if it's over the 30% value, which 30% of 3.9 million is 1.17 million, anything that we do to either one of those buildings, because the value of the base repair of both the South and the Wilkins was almost identical, if I remember right. So anything in the $1.2 million area for a repair of those buildings would trigger full ADA compliance of each of those individual buildings. So we can't do things piecemeal. If this were rejected, the consequence of voting no is not base repair, it's a full rental project, and then it's probably a full ad reno, because again, correct me if I'm wrong, Carl, but the ADA, make those buildings ADA compliant, you'll probably lose some classroom space. You could need to do things like widen doorways and hallways and create more.
Expand the toilet rooms.
Right? So you'll end up with base repair less than what you have now for two buildings that are right now at capacity. Sorry, I get animated about these.
No, that is extremely helpful context, and I really appreciate those additional data points.
Base repair is not an option.
Right. So what I'm hearing is a no vote does not mean the taxes will not be raised. Taxes will be raised, but we will not have a new building to show for it.
No, you're going to have to bring a new project to MSBA, and as again Carl mentioned, the only two examples he knows of, he's got more experience than anybody in this forum, online or in person, was 8 to 10 years. So if you're looking at bringing another new project, you're bringing, as Superintendent Baeta said, you got to bring something different, and you got to solve the same questions and issues, because, you know, as I said at the last two forums, I point this out, I don't think, we're not bringing a project, we're bringing a solution to the MSBA and asking for a grant to solve a problem. That's how the MSBA regs read. It's a preferred solution to a facilities problem that we have. Some of that's my words, but the regs speak of solution and not a project. I think that's significant, actually. You still need to solve the problem if you vote no.
Thank you so much.
Karen, do you have any questions? No. Okay. I'll try to be brief. I'm going to zero in on two areas that I've gotten some questions about. One is our confidence in this. We have this COP of $114 million. $113 million was voted at town meeting because we've already spent $1 million on the feasibility study. But can you speak a little bit more to, we've talked about, we had the two independent cost estimators come in. Can you speak to a little bit more about the construction manager at risk and how that's going to help play into making sure that, that we're on time and under budget, and any other factors that confirm that this is our hard limit. We're not going to be coming back in 2 years saying, oops, we overspent the budget. I know that I know the answer, but if you could explain to some of the people who might have questions about how we know.
Well, I could start, I guess, TJ. We simplified the cost a great deal by putting it on one slide here, but there's a lot of backup that goes into the numbers. And within that total budget of $114 million, you should think of it as a turnkey cost. It includes the hard cost, so to speak, of construction, the actual site work and excavation and concrete and steel and windows and so forth. the so-called hard costs, but it includes appropriate kinds of allocations for the soft costs. That includes furniture and equipment and fees, but most of all, it includes contingencies. So it is allowing for escalation. It knows that this project is not going to start construction tomorrow. It's a couple years or a year and a half away or something to get to the midpoint of construction, and when the actual bids will be in and so forth. It includes contingencies for unknowns. When we put a shovel in the ground, we've done a lot of research, but there could always be some surprises there. So there's appropriate levels of contingencies there. And we will have 3 more cost estimates done before we actually start construction. So in each of those, we have checkpoints that we can confirm that we're still on budget. And if for some reason something has changed, we have time to still maneuver and get it back on track before we start construction. And so it's a formula that has been used a lot, and then on top of it, as was mentioned, is the notion of using a construction manager at risk who will join us shortly here while we're still in design, assuming the project goes ahead here, and will contribute to doing cost estimates, as I say, 3 more times before we actually start construction, along with our independent cost estimator. So there's a good check there, and the construction manager, the firm that's actually going to build it, has subcontractors and connections to the marketplace for material costs and so forth. So it's very realistic. And again, just in general, our track record, the high school was not unusual in the sense of coming in under budget. The team collectively has generally a proven track record, and MSBA's grant is a maximum. They're not going to go up, and we all take that very seriously, that the total project budget will not go up either.
Thank you. And last question, and on a little bit of a high note, assuming the voters vote yes, when would residents see the tax increase? Some people seem to think that they would get a bill June 12th for some money, and the other one would be, how would that change over time as their assessed home values change? Would their tax impact change? Would they see a higher taxes if they, finish their bathroom renovation, or they add it on to their house, or just market fluctuations? How would that affect that?
Well, I can say on the construction side of the TV, you can say on the tax side, on the revenue side, the cash flow is not going to, you're not going to go out and borrow 66 million or 114 million. You're not going to borrow 66 million on June 12th. The next year or so is just in design and a little bit of site prep, perhaps. The real borrowing is not going to happen for at least another year. And then even then, you're going to borrow in portions of this. So, the first one might be 30 million and then 20 million and then a final of 10 million or something like that over the next 3 to 4 years. And so the tax impact of paying back the interest on that is going to vary. But the rates also could vary, right, TJ, depending on when you do the borrowing.
Right, with the high school, they did, borrowing was done in tranches as needed. I suspect this would be the same, but they also, I know this from speaking with the town accountant at the time, although it's the town treasurer that does the borrowing, that they also tried to hit rates when they were best. So they sort of played the market when it came to borrowing. And then there was a point somewhere in 2000, I want to say 17 or 18, where the then current town manager spoke with the current town financial advisor and got a pretty good deal on packaging the past borrowing and refinancing everything into a current package. So all those tranches were consolidated into a better rate. So I think if you look at the debt presentation that Hilltop put together back on April 30th, I think you'll see that the bulk of the high school debt is fully payable or fully paid in 2038, and that's because it's calculated back to 2007, 2018 or 19. It was a couple of years into the project, is what I was saying. So, so I really can't add anything to Carl. He hit all the points that I have. But it will fluctuate. The estimates that we're given are based on current conditions. They could fluctuate up or down, but I think I think they do take into account, I can't speak for Hilltop, but they do take into account what they anticipate the market to be like also.
Thank you. Any last questions or comments? All right. Again, I want to thank the team for coming and presenting to us. Again, you can find the tax calculator on the website. If you go to Stoughton Schools and look for the new elementary project webpage, you can find the tax calculator and all sorts of other information there, including copies of these slides. It's a great tool. Again, you're looking at your assessed home value, not what Zillow says, because you will get a different value for that. But again, appreciate that. If you have any questions, you can go to that website and email us questions. Somebody from the project team will answer you. If you have a community group and you would like the project team to come and present to your community group before the vote, email us and we'll come and talk to you about that. Anything else to add, Mr. Ricaburo?
Nothing to read. Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to your committee.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time tonight. All right.
So,
Thank you. All right. That's very helpful. If we can move on to the next, moving on to the next, our handbook presentation. We have the elementary schools, middle school, and high school. We want to, Ms. Monia, do you want to start for the elementary schools?
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Nice
Thank
to
you.
see you all again. I haven't been here as much this year. So I'm here on behalf of the entire elementary team, Mr. Cancelleri, Mr. Dorr, Mr. Gulia, and Mrs. Feeney. And we went over the handbook several times together as a team. And my presentation will be very brief because we had no additions, deletions, or revisions to speak of. We did update the things that you see in the memo. The calendar has been updated. We made some changes to some personnel based on hires or appointments, and obviously our new school committee member. Other than that, there's no changes, so it was pretty brief. Any questions?
Yes, Chris.
Just a request.
Sure.
Can you change my name to Chris?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's easy.
Any other questions or comments about the elementary school handbooks? All right, thank you. Yes. And thanks for pitching in on the previous. All right, next up is the O'Donnell Middle School, and I'm turning it over to Ms. Crowley.
Good evening, everyone. I made a few changes to and revisions when going over the OMS Student and Parent Handbook, and this was done with the OMS School Council as well. There were updates to the calendar and some of the marking periods. Names still have to be adjusted and updated, so for the committee as well as on the OMS administration end, so those will also be updated. But there are some larger revisions. So the first one is under the athletic eligibility, and that's on page 12. And there was two changes. One in the age and grade requirement. This was the first year that OMS Athletics was connected to our athletic department, and last summer we had come up with the eligibility requirements. So just seeing after a full year of what that looked like, athletic eligibility for age and grade was for grade 7 and 8. But we want to make sure we can still run a team even if we do not have enough students with grade 7 and 8 alone. So adding the sentence in to open up registration to grade 6 in the event that there are not enough students in grade 7 and 8 is a line we wanted to add as the OMS School Council. The other area that we were looking at with athletic eligibility was with attendance. So the current change would be to change attendance from students who have 6 or more unexcused absences. That's what it is right now. So by trimester 3, 6 unexcused absences for the school year. That looks a little different in trimester 1 compared to trimester 3 when we're looking in April. And part of the athletic program is really for us to try and get our students involved, get them engaged, and we want to make sure that in the middle school age, they have something to work towards for the year. They might have a difficult trimester 1, but we can turn it around in trimester 2. Maybe they're looking forward to basketball that season or something. So we wanted to add in the phrase "in the previous trimester." So looking at the attendance for the previous trimester, attendance is still an area that that I know as a district we are working on and looking at chronic absenteeism, but in this area we felt 6 or unexcused absences in the previous trimester still gives us some motivation when we're working with students and families of something to look forward to, and we would want to see that improvement from trimester to trimester with attendance, and athletics might be a way we can really reinvest students into coming into school. So that was for the athletic eligibility section. Yes.
So this last year, have you had enough 7th and 8th graders to make up a team, or did you find that not enough to make up a team and we're adding in 6th graders now?
So for almost every sport, we have had more than enough in grades 7 and 8, except for in the fall sports for cross country.
Okay.
Cross country we ended up opening it up to 6th grade, and so really this is realigning. But for the other athletic sports, we definitely had enough 7th and 8th grade registrations.
Would you have enough to create an additional team for 6th graders that might be interested, or is it too small?
For soccer, we definitely would have in the fall. It was really looking at sport by sport. But then that would become a conversation with the athletic director and Dr. Baeta, because an additional team would mean additional coaches, which is additional finances.
And, sorry, one more question. Do you believe it's worth it, given that we're tying athletics with potentially getting students to be more present in school or reduce absenteeism?
I believe so, especially given this season's track and field numbers. We have about 90 students participating in track and field, and looking at the trimester 3, where the attendance was in trimester 3, there was a number of outreach in terms of the academic and attendance requirements. And we've been doing attendance communication all school year, and I will say I've never received more feedback or responses to our emails than when we talked about being ineligible for track and field. And then we were able to have a dialogue communication. We had an increase in the buyback April break program to earn some days back so that they could become eligible for track and field. It really reinforced the messages that our school counselors and administrators were sharing about how attendance matters, and how, especially by the time they go to high school, that's included for credits towards classes.
Very good. Thank you.
So the next section is communication for school-related problems and concerns. And the highlighted section is all new, mainly because the communication right now in our handbook is really the family to school communication end. It's guidelines and really lays out for families how, if they're a parent, how to communicate to the school, who to reach out to first. With a staff of about 100 people, that's very clearly outlined. We wanted to add something in for just transparency on the family end. Once, if there's an issue or concerns arise, what's our protocol and our process, so that there's just some transparency on the school communicating end. We share this in phone calls and communication with families, but felt that this would be a helpful addition to the handbook in terms of us communicating how we address things. So in terms of a classroom issue that starts at the teacher level, and a teacher may address it, and if needed, they'll refer it to the office and do an office referral. On the second end, if it's a more serious in nature issue or an incident that occurs outside of the classroom, in the hallway, in the cafeteria, at dismissal or arrival, then the administrator would be the one receiving that report and working on the situation and communicating home. And then if there's ever any issues or concerns of an incident that results in a potential injury or anything medical, just the clarity that administration and our school nursing staff, we work and communicate with each other. And so the administrator would be the one investigating, but then the school nurse would be the one really treating anything medical. The school nurse provides that information to an administrator, and then the administrator communicates all the information home, because inevitably there will be questions about how or when or what happened that the school nurse might not be aware of those pieces. And so the administrator would communicate all of it home with the option of, I can transfer you over to the nurse with any additional questions on the medical end. So it's the communication section.
Can I just ask a quick question? So this isn't like new practice, this is just codifying
Yes.
and transparently sharing what is already happening?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I had a comment and a question. So the comment is just, especially being that this is the communication section, make sure you have this proofed, by maybe someone on the English staff or someone with editing capabilities. And I wasn't 100% clear when it says an administrator receives the report. It seems to reference a specific report, but then it doesn't mention that anywhere. Is that something you can clarify? What is the report? Where does the report come from?
Oh, it's a report of any incident, so.
Okay.
Yes.
Then you might want to just clarify that. Thank you.
Okay. So the next section is to our sprays, perfumes, and colognes. So this is on page 20. This is also an existing practice, just including it in our handbook. And so the existing practice is sprays, perfumes, and colognes are not allowed in school. It is a health issue, and it does affect the ability for students and staff to be able to breathe. We have had to send students home because they aren't able to breathe if cologne gets sprayed in the room. They end up in the clinic and they need, and they're having trouble breathing, and we would have to. We've had those incidents this year, as well as staff, where we're opening up the windows and we've had to kind of tag a staff member out of the room so that they could get some air and to breathe. It's really disruptive. And so this is a current practice. We've had this practice that it's not allowed in the building, but it's middle school, and so that it's that developmental age of body odor and everything else. And so it's just the reminder of, and putting it into our handbook of that is the practice, and so including that in our handbook.
Question for that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment. I just saw, within a few days of reading this, the New York Times article talking about the growing prevalence because of TikTok of young middle school age boys, particularly buying upscale designer perfumes and colognes. So I thought the timing of this edition, even though it was current practice, I thought was really impactful. So thank you for adding this.
Having a son at the middle school, I know he likes to put on cologne, probably from what Chris just mentioned. I was wondering if this is just the sprays taken into school, or is it the fact that they're wearing cologne to school? Because I know in some health areas, they ask you not to wear perfume because of health-related issues.
Right now, it's just the sprays being brought into the building.
Mhm.
So, I mean, they could spray it at home in the morning and then come into the building, but just not spraying it in the building.
That could cause a lot of other issues, Mr. Barbosa.
As a former educator of high school boys, or 14-year-old boys, I can tell you that this is a real issue if you have not taught the boys. When they discover Axe body spray, it is an issue. Appreciate that.
So the next section is lockers. And this is actually going back to a previous practice that we had. The last time this was in practice was in the 2019-2020 school year. And the only reason why we moved away from this was because of the pandemic. And it's adding in the line that all students must keep bags and backpacks in their locker. So as the OMS, as part of our OMS School Council meetings, we've been discussing school safety, and as one of those pieces, bags and backpacks. And so in the previous practice at OMS up until the pandemic was bags and backpacks were in their lockers, and students use their lockers. We have enough lockers in the building for all of our students, so they'd leave their locker bags in their lockers, and then there would be locker times, and they'd change out their books, and they were very excited coming to the middle school because they get a locker. And so with the pandemic, we went back to backpacks, and then in the last couple of school years, it's been optional. So all students have the ability to have a locker, but they could also still keep their backpack. And so that's the current practice now. And so we have decided to move back to fully using lockers. For a couple of reasons. One, it will help in the hallways with the crowds because the backpacks will all be in their lockers. It will also allow phones. This means phones are in lockers and not right at their backpacks. Right now, our cell phone rules are in their bags or their lockers. So if their bags have to be in their lockers, that means the phones do as well. And so for a middle school student, maybe there's a little less temptation there. They shouldn't be on their phone during the day, but a middle school student, they might try and sneak a peek at their phone. And so if that's in their locker, that can help also with the cell phone, any cell phone issues. And just it's honestly just safer for bags and backpacks to be in their lockers. And I've heard a few parents too at the window actually make the comment, being surprised that they're allowed to have their backpacks.
So I got a question, but I've walked through the middle school many times, and some of the lockers are really tiny. Given the backpack, they have to kids put down in the hallway, then remove things to stack inside the locker. I'm just wondering if there's enough time for the students to unpack their backpack so they can stack it in those tiny lockers, and then have time to get back to the class.
Yeah, so it's definitely, there's a variety of sizes with lockers. There's some narrow ones, there are some large ones, depends on area of the building, in terms of the locker sizes. But I will also say in terms of supplies that students need, it's a little in terms of how many binders or notebooks. Chromebooks are definitely needed. But then for the most part, the number of materials of books has really decreased in the last few years because so much of our curriculum is now on Chromebooks. For example, in math class, there's no textbook, it's all online. The curriculum is online with the Chromebook. So there are less physical materials, but that's where locker times will come in, and it will be an adjustment for the entire building because even our students going into grade 8 haven't had to do this practice. So part of this will also be planning for the beginning of the school year. We might have to dedicate times, and with our new advisories, we would have some of those times to help with the organizational skills of locks and lockers, and how do we, maybe we can organize and prioritize what are my first couple of classes, where does a break come in, so what material would I need? And this would just be a very practical way to, in action for students to practice some organizational skills.
Yeah, I agree. I would just say, when parents get the recommendation of, this is the material you're going to need for this class, for this class, for this class, for this class, so that can be looked at, because when you get the material for all the class, it's a massive amount and it's not going to fit in the lockers. And if that can be looked at and then reduced to what they actually need, it would help fit into the locker. Otherwise, it's saying, get more than can fit in the locker,
Yeah.
but put it in the locker.
No, I think that's a great point. Thank you. The next section is bicycles and scooters, and this is just including the line of having students who are riding bicycles or scooters to wear a helmet. We've actually just seen a number of increase in terms of bicycles and scooters, and I think it's great that students are becoming more active in different ways that they are getting to school, walking, biking, riding a scooter, but we want them to be safe, and so wearing a helmet. And so that is a line that we wanted to add to that section.
Sorry. This is a question for me to learn. I know we're asking them to bring helmets, which is great, and I agree with that 100%. But can that be enforced if they're coming from home and they're on public streets and not on the school property itself?
Yeah, so it's actually a state law under the certain age that you have to wear a helmet. And so we know that policing this is, in terms of us, is, I will tell you, we had just recently an incident at OMS where the next day, at least one of those two students came in with a helmet on because it was recognized that it could have been something that really endangered a child. So it's very difficult to carry out, but it's going to be a constant, once you're on school grounds, because we can't police the road. But on school grounds, we can then say, if you're not wearing it, you can't bring it. And that would stop them at the gate, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
The next section is dress code and appearance, and this is a recommendation because I know with the school committee has a policy on dress code, and so there is a recommendation from the OMS School Council, and it is actually adding a specific two phrases, and this would actually make it a little stricter at OMS. So one is to add the line and/or items that may interfere with school safety, and an example of that is blankets. Which sounds funny that it's an issue there, but
Anyone who's had a middle school girl.
yes, blankets are part of the fashion right now, and so we see them a lot. They prefer that to a sweater. But blankets they trip over them in the hallway. They do become an issue. They are middle school, so sometimes they play with them. And so we'd rather not have blankets in our building. Questions on that end? On that? Okay. And then the next section is fighting. Just clarification on our current practice for fighting. So you can see I've crossed out the line of fighting on school grounds is so dangerous and disruptive, and I've crossed out that suspension may even result on the first offense. That has been adjusted to the current practice, which aligns with the discipline laws, which it will result in an emergency removal and then a suspension hearing. Because then at the suspension hearing, that's where the discipline, after everyone has had their due process, the hearing officer will then make the decision on what the consequence is there.
And just for clarification, I learned today that the emergency coding within the system, we can actually, instead of saying that the student was suspended, they're not. They're in an emergency situation, so it codes it that way as clarity and not for the purposes of the student is actually suspended.
And then the last section is actually our offense category table, and we included additional notes at the bottom, so that's that next page. And our offense category table is really, it lists examples of behaviors from the type 1 to the type 4 offenses and typical consequences. This is a page that is referenced frequently throughout the school year when OMS administration meets with families. It's also, it's kind of a nice one-pager for a lot of families as well, so I know a lot of parents also refer to this. So this is a page in our handbook frequently used. So some of the updates are, for examples of behavior have been made to reflect what we have been seeing and just some common behaviors and updating that. So on the kind of lesser serious behaviors, the type 1, just inappropriate hallway behavior, or failure to stay for a teacher assigned session. So that's that clarity there. Teachers also assign sessions if they have a student stay back with them, whether it's during lunch or after school, to discuss and talk through whatever that issue is. But if a student fails to stay for that we wanted to specify there. Type 2, we wanted to include possession of spray in that as well, especially if that becomes a repeated offense. Or skipping class as well. And then really for type 3 and 4, these are just updating to what we're seeing in the building currently. One change is under type 3, actions which may cause injury to other students, Previously, that said actions which may cause injury, and it did not specify. The OMS School Council and I, we had some discussions on this throughout the year, and we decided to actually split this up into two categories. Type 3 is actions which may cause injury to other students, and we actually put into Type 4 actions which may cause injury to staff. We wanted to split that clarification up because the expectation is if a staff member arrives, everything stops and they listen to the directions of the teacher or whichever staff member is providing directions. We also included intentional damage to school-issued Chromebooks just based off working with technology and damages we're seeing. We wanted to include that into Type 3. We also wanted to include the violation of a student safety plan. Safety plans are created if there is concern for student safety. For example, if there's a student conflict, and so a safety plan is developed, and those safety plans are developed with the administrator along with the families and students, and everybody agrees to the plan and signs on with the plan. So if a student knowingly and willingly is violating that plan, that's a much bigger and more serious situation. So we wanted to include that, as well as interfering with a school investigation. And then the last one on Type 4 that we also added was creating a school-wide emergency, if any actions are creating a school-wide emergency. The notes section at the bottom, really that's a quick notes reference to more descriptions within the handbook that already exist, but because this document is used so frequently as a one-pager, especially between school and families, we wanted just that extra clarification if they want to see more information, could point them in the direction in the handbook.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments on the middle school handbook? Yes.
Actually, on all handbooks, I was just wondering, what's your feeling on parents actually reading the handbook or students reading it?
It varies. I'll say that honestly. It does vary. It is shared out. We reference the handbook. It won't look like the but we'll reference pieces of the handbook when we do our team meetings in the beginning of the year with students. And then it is referred to with parents. We'll go back to the handbook. And there are times, though, where I do receive communication from parents when they're referencing specific pieces of the handbook. How frequently it is used I'm not sure if all 860 families are reading this entire handbook, honestly.
I was wondering if you thought it would be helpful to actually create some type of video in which we're in the multimedia world, to translate this into a media, visual aspect as opposed to reading. And with that, do you feel that might be better? Or not the better, but being able to get the message across to a wider audience than the current paper does?
I think that's actually came up in my student support meeting the other day with some of my counselors when we were discussing just opportunities next year to increase. We're always looking at ways to increase parent and family community engagement, specifically with our families and parents and guardians. And so thinking about how what we have currently in place and different opportunities, and so thinking through opportunities within existing events, for example, so of optional or additional sessions in back to school, for example, at back to school night. But then a topic that we were actually discussing the other day was making shorter form videos and through like the Screencastify and even navigating not only for the handbook, but we were specifically talking about Power School, Parent Portal, some of those pieces, Google Classroom, there's all of these platforms now that I know even feedback from the OMS School Council, the parents on the OMS School Council have said it's pretty confusing. And so short videos that can be linked and that way can be always spread out, that people can refer back to, almost like a parent guardian communication hub might be helpful.
One last question. In supplementing this, is available in different languages for at least some parents that we're getting a lot of new students, and it'd be wonderful if it's in a language that a parent can actually read and actually get an understanding of what they're expected in the first and throughout the 180 days of school.
Yes, so we have our handbook currently in English and in Portuguese. These drafts right now are just in English, so once we finalize everything in English, then we'll work on translations. But I do think, like this year, for example, we're at OMS. We have a variety of languages, but specifically in talking with Dr. Quealy, there is a need now also for not only English, but also Portuguese and then Haitian Creole as well. And so looking into, is there a way to translate the handbook into Haitian Creole as well? The Portuguese handbook would just be updating with these revisions.
Just to add, you're going to be seeing a lot of translation of documents over the next couple of years. There's a big push, even for our website. The print on our website, the colors that are used on our website and having to be meet civil rights compliances, all of that stuff is stuff that we're going to be undertaking over the next couple of years. It's just, it's time and money. Those are the two things, time and money.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for?
Could I have something on the backpacks? So on the backpacks, I know that, at least for my household, that was a very happy occasion when they were able to keep their backpacks with them. For them, it just meant that they didn't have to try and hurry up from one end of the school to the other and then back again for lockers. And the schedule is going to be a little bit different, but still it creates that much less time for them to be able to get from class to class. And also, there were times when they would have stuff in their locker and then be like, oh, shoot, I don't have this paperwork. Can I go and get this paperwork? And sometimes they could, and sometimes they couldn't. Where if they have their backpack, they pretty much kept everything in there. I also know that sometime during like the middle to latter portion of the school year, that locker would look pretty scary. And at the end of the year, they'd be pulling stuff out of there that was like long gone, you know, snacks and gum and.
So, as someone who had to clean out the lockers
Yes.
when we shut down for the pandemic.
Yeah, you
part of
probably
my
haven't had to do
internship.
that in a long time, so that's probably a happy thing for you. So I would say, I wonder
Lockers were,
really how popular it is in the student body to actually take away the ability to have their backpacks, which really only seem to be because the phones are an issue. So if we don't want phones in the classroom, maybe just, you know, working with that instead of getting rid of backpacks altogether. And similar to what Armando said, backpacks, even with the addition of Chromebooks, with all of the notebooks and everything, I mean, I have held those backpacks, and they are heavy. So they do get very packed with stuff, and trying to jam it into some of those lockers is difficult. So I just wonder if there's another way that can be done where they can still have, even if it's just a small book bag or something. That was just mine. And then on when you talk about violations, and I see on a lot of them, it's violation, punishment. And I wonder if there's a way to make it violation, punishment, teaching moment. You know, and I'm new, so that may be in there, and it's just not coming through in the handbook. But especially at the middle school level, when we're talking about people who have really only been on this earth for maybe 11 or 12 years total, you know, I don't know how well punishment is for some of this stuff, as well as more of a remediation. So just I guess a comment or statement on that one. Thanks.
Yeah. And we're always, I agree, we're always looking for ways to, not necessarily punishment, but for teachable moments and restorative consequences as well. And so kind of built into all of these, it's always an opportunity for a teaching moment. So if it's an office session or even a teacher session, a lot of the times that's where the discussion is had, because we talk about time and place a lot with students, and it might not be the time or the place to have the conversation about that specific incident in front of a class of 25 students, right? It might be a better time and place separately, individually, at a later time. when there's been a little bit of space from when it happened, whether that's even a couple periods later at lunch or even just at the end of the day to revisit a situation. So I agree, though. In this case, it might be coming across more of the negative consequences because these are negative behaviors, but we always talk about actions and consequences, and that can be positive consequences as well. And that's what we're working towards with PBIS, the positive recognitions as well. In the handbook right now, it's this page in particular is the misbehaviors, and so it's the negative consequences. But we actually just finished our 3-year PBIS meeting. We've been in this 3-year academy, and that's a piece that might be an undertaking for next year of how much can we also implement the PBIS and positive behaviors and what we're doing there also within our handbook.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much. A lot of thoughtful changes for this. And the next is the high school. And for that, Ms. Miller.
Good evening.
I should just give you a permanent chair, you know.
I know, right?
Our own name tag.
Yeah.
You all still awake? Thank you for having us. This year, for the handbook for the high school, we don't have a tremendous amount of significant substance changes. We have some kind of cleaning up some things, codifying some practices that we're already using, and then some additional changes. So the first two, for the sake of time, I did notice that on the second bullet, there is a typo. That should say values of A and A minus, not A1.
No, that was AI.
Yeah. So those first two bullets we talked about at my program of studies presentation. So they are updating, removing the old mission statement, putting in the new vision of the graduate, and correcting the grade scale to be something that made more sense across the board. During the pandemic, we had altered our buyback procedure for school attendance due to the nature of the pandemic and students not being able to be there on Saturday school and those kinds of things. And so then this year we went back to our old procedure, which was Saturday school. So students come in on Saturdays from 8 to 12 to buy back a day of attendance. So because at the high school level, attendance is tied to credits for classes, so it's important that they are making up those days when they miss them. So we just went back and revised our buyback procedures to be in line with that practice of using Saturday school, which was an old practice that we had been using. And then on page 15, we added language to Learning Commons just about expectations, just tighten that up a little bit. On page 16, we added quiet lunch. Quiet lunch is actually an option we've been using at the high school probably since 2016-17. It never made its way into the handbook for a variety of reasons, but it is an alternative lunch space for our kiddos in the new building because of the convenience of where we've built the main office. The conference room is right off of the cafeteria. It's a nice private space. So students know that if they don't want to be in the cafeteria for any number of reasons, that they can grab their lunch and just come to the conference room. They don't have to ask. It's unlocked. An adjustment counselor staffs that. They can sit there quietly and be on their phone or listen to music or talk quietly to a friend or just have some peace and quiet, which some of our students really do enjoy. So we just put that into the handbook so people are aware or more aware of that alternative. We did also add an electronic pass system this year. I think I talked about that here at one point. And so I did revise in the handbook the sections on passes to include those electronic hall pass language and the expectations around it. So that is on 17, and I believe it's somewhere again later down. Yeah, on page 31. This year, we also have seen across the district a lot of intentional destruction of school devices, and so the district has sort of implemented a new protocol about how to deal with school-issued devices and their treatment of it and what would be the consequences for intentional destruction. So we did add in on page 19 school-issued devices and expectations. On Page 27, we begin to get into the code of conduct categories, 1 through 4. In several of these are things that already existed in our handbook. We just hadn't codified them underneath the code of conduct numbers. So for example, vaping has existed in our handbook for quite a few years now. We just hadn't listed it under conduct code category 2, so we placed it in that list. False accusations, unfortunately, this is something we're seeing a little uptick in at the high school, students falsely accusing other students. Since it's a concerning trend and something we'd like to extinguish, we are putting it into our handbook under conduct code category 3, and also adding a description for false accusations on page 31. So it's the description of what we mean by that is added in there so students understand what that means. Obviously, for obvious reasons, it's detrimental to the school body. It takes a lot of time and energy for administration to be investigating these claims only to find out that they're false, and obviously it's damaging to the relationship of students. So we want to make sure that we're addressing those. Harassment and sexual harassment has also always existed in our handbook for as long as I can remember. We just have added it to exist under Conduct Code Category 4 in that listing of offenses. Indecent exposure is being added to Conduct Code Category 4. Fortunately, we've had a few of those instances this year as well. So we want to make sure that students understand the proper way to handle themselves in a public building. You'll see that we added destruction of school issued devices, again, referencing what I already mentioned. We added that on page 29. Under MIAA, student athletes who partake in substances are subjected to suspension from athletic play for a certain number of percentage of their games. That's always existed too. It exists in an athletic handbook portion of our handbook, but I noticed that there was maybe an oversight that the actual language around chemical health violations was absent from other parts of the handbook. So that it's clear to our students and parents, we just tied that language in on page 29 and 32. I updated the consequences for cell phone violations. We simplified that process this year to a parent pickup if students violate the cell phone policy rather than the kind of multiple step infractions that we'd had last year, which became pretty unmanageable with the quantity of which we were collecting cell phones. So now they are parent pickup at the office if they're collected. Already mentioned the false accusations. Already mentioned that we updated the hall passes. The big, substantial change for us this year is adding in some consequences for being tardy to school. So as you know, we've been focusing on attendance across the board. We find that our students are tardy to school at a fairly large rate. Students are supposed to be in their first period class at 7:35 a.m., not arriving to school at that point. And so we do see that there's been an uptick over the years in tardy to school, which is detrimental to them. And because we are moving to a new schedule next year, which does have that long block, we really want to encourage students to be in school and be in school on time, as they're going to end up hitting that same 1 or 2 classes with tardies to school. And we want to also try to eliminate the unintended consequence of students sort of navigating that attendance system where they know that if we come to school and there's 5 minutes left in class, I'm going to be marked as present, but they've missed all that time. So we're looking at trying to address that so that students are actually coming to school on time. We have added a description to restorative practices on page 33. So Ms. Powers, that sort of touches upon your last question with Ms. Crowley. We wanted to make sure that we have some other opportunities to restore the damage that misbehavior, bad decisions, poor choices can cause to individuals and to the school community. So there's some opportunity for some restorative practices. And then on the advice of our school attorney, we are changing social suspension to social probation, just the term itself.
Thank you. Any questions?
And I went really fast. I'm so sorry.
Well, it looks like a lot, but you noted that there's a couple things that are here in multiple places, so it's a little bit more compact than others. Leslie, you have a question?
Yeah. So, comment and question. So I appreciate, I think the tightening up of language makes a lot of sense in all these places, and I think given all of the big changes happening for next year with the schedule, I think it makes a lot of sense to kind of like level set and just like tighten up and not make any other really significant changes for next year. So I appreciate that. I was curious about the tardy policy. Do we collect, or is it possible to collect any kind of data about why students are tardy? Because I'm wondering, I think it absolutely makes sense to be holding students accountable for coming to school on time and like not missing out on learning time, but also just thinking about like what things might be beyond their control, and just like, do we have any information on that? Is that something we collect, or is that something we'd be able to in the
We
future?
do, probably not formally,
Yeah.
but we have a student support team that meets each Friday. That is our school administration, our school counseling department. They sort of track students who are having trouble, either attendance, grades, or behavior, and they talk at length about those students and what those challenges might be. They share information, and they create plans for being able to try to re-engage whatever the issue may be. So if it's an attendance issue, a school counselor might step up and say, okay, I'm going to meet with that parent or reach out to that parent and that child, find out if there's any obstacles for them coming to school. So in that way, we find some of that information. And then, you know, in meeting with parents and students as we go. We also have some sort of anecdotal evidence. We do have a large number of students who are working a large number of hours, and so they tend to come a little bit later. We have students who are in charge of childcare for their younger siblings or relatives, and so they might not be able to get to school until their younger siblings or relatives are at school. We have students who are disengaged, right? So, they're just not loving the school environment and loving the learning process that we provide. So we sort of fight that as well. And then we have, you know, the teenage brain. So they, some of who are driving on their own, some who are getting themselves up by themselves in the morning and don't necessarily have an adult that's sort of like trying to encourage them to get up and ready because of work schedules for guardians and parents. So there's lots of different reasons. And like I said, we collect them sort of anecdotally and informally through all those meetings that we have with students and parents, but we don't necessarily have a formal mechanism.
Okay, I think that's really helpful. And just what's on my mind is kind of like if we do have a student who's like responsible for getting younger siblings to school or something, are they still staying after school for a 30-minute session or something? Like, does that make sense for that situation? And I guess you all are the experts on all
Yeah.
of that, so I'll leave it to you all, but just...
And I think we have the opportunity because we have that warning sort of stage, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Where we can have those conversations and find out if there's a way that we can get that child there on time.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Karen?
So I had a question about the false accusations. Wonder, how do you know, like, how do you figure out if it was false or not? And really the glaring thing that came out to me was, what if there's an accusation of something in sexual nature? We wouldn't want to dissuade someone from saying something, worrying that, you know, someone's going to say, well, that's not true, how can you prove it?
Yep.
You know, so I don't want to stop kids from being able
Absolutely.
to do that. So I'm sure you have something in the works that will
Absolutely, I share your concern.
keep that from happening. And then just my second one, completely opposite, would be the sports with the attendance. And I'm not sure that everything trickles down to the coaches. So things like when a student is late, how late can they be? I saw something in there about 7:45 as opposed to 7:35. So they kind of get that 10-minute window where they don't miss their practice or their game because they got a 10-minute grace. I'm not sure that the coaching staff understands that across the board. If they are, say they got in 15 minutes late or 20 minutes late, now did they miss the practice? Does that mean they don't go to practice and go home? Or do they just sit and watch everybody practice for 2 hours? And if they do miss that practice, now does that mean they don't get to play in the game tomorrow? So I think there's a lot with that is a kind of a problem. And then on some absentee things, so if a student is absent, do they get like a one absent, kind of grace? Like, okay, you can be absent once, and we're going without a doctor's note or something. You know, because sometimes everyone needs kind of a mental health day. You know, where they're like, listen, today I can't get there, I'm just not going to do it. You know, does that mean that they miss now too? Because even in the real world, you know, people have days where they just can't get to work that day. So I wonder if some of these things, and also when we were talking about punishment and so forth, I have noticed that at times when a student is being punished at school for poor behavior, then the coaching staff seems to be adding on to that punishment. So a student's being double punished. Our athletes being double punished for things that happen. So I know they're kind of opposite, but I appreciate
There's a lot of
your-
questions there as far as
Yes, I'm
trying to
sorry.
remember them all.
I'm sorry, I appreciate you addressing
That's
them.
okay. Let's start with false accusations. So I share your concerns. It would take a lot for us to get to the conclusion that was a false accusation. We do a really thorough investigation. We talk to a lot of students. We talk to a lot of parents. We talk to teachers. We look at video evidence. We do a lot to sort of put all those pieces together. And sometimes we'll interview a child more than once, particularly if things aren't lining up and stories don't seem to match. And so there would be a lot that would go into that investigation to be able to make that determination. So we wouldn't take that false accusation lightly, first of all. In terms of athletics, we can definitely look at our athletic handbook and make sure that our coaches are all in line and in good communication. We have a new athletic director this year. It's his first year. We do send attendance reports out at in the middle of the day that goes out to all our coaches that tells them, you know, which students were absent or which students were late, and they're supposed to enforce those policies with their athletes. And if that's not happening, we can certainly tighten that up on our side. It's always good to revisit our policies and make sure that there's consistency across the board. I know that in the athletic handbook talks about there's a warning like on the first tardy or whatnot, so we can make sure that people are aware of that. In terms of absences at the high school, absences are tied to credit for classes, and so, but they do have a certain number of unexcused absences that they're allowed before they lose credit. So for a student that's in a full year class, they have 10 absences that are unexcused, and they continue to retain credit for their classes. But on the 11th absence that's unexcused, that's when they lose credit for that class. That means, too, that they can also have additional absences that are excused through doctor's notes. So to your point, if a student is having, needs a mental health day, needs a break for whatever reason, has some other non-sort of documented reason for being out, they do have the authority to do that. We still discourage, to use those sparingly and discourage overuse of those because you're still missing class, but you have that 10 absences to play with that are undocumented. So that could be a kid's car breaks down, a kid has an accident on the way to the car, on the way to school, it could be, they just need a mental health day, it could be a number of things.
I just meant towards sports.
Oh. So.
Because it's kind of a dead stop.
Yeah, I mean, if they're absent from school on that day, they cannot play unless it's a medical excuse or religious exemption. But and so they can't participate in the sport that day. Just like they can't participate in band that day, after school, they can't participate in those extracurriculars. They wouldn't be able to attend prom. There's a lot, it's all tied together, so it's not just the athlete who has that penalty. We expect kids to be in school and be in school on time and be there for the whole day in order to be able to participate in those extracurriculars.
Yeah, I think there was something in the verbiage, and I'm sorry, I must have left my paperwork at home, but that there was one day of absence, undocumented, unexcused, that was allowed during the athletic calendar.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if that was listed in there or
find
not.
out.
Yeah, we're going to have to clear that up because the MIAA rules of expectation is that minimum of what counts for a day. What counts for a day is a minimum of a half day, right? So that's why our early release days count as an educational day, even though they're, half the time. So the unless that's changed, and we can verify this, but as a former coach and principal, I'm pretty sure I'm right on this one, that it has to be, you have to be, quote, in school unless there's an exemption under a religious situation and that type of stuff. Two, as important, interesting that we're having this conversation about mental health days, because I have a proposal that's come forward from high school students about supporting mental health days as excused absences, and specifically quoting regulations in other states that have allowed for that. So these are students, I haven't met with them yet, along with Ms. Miller, but, and there's a lot of avenues here, right? The support that we want to have, is there a liability? There's a lot here, but we definitely want to listen to the students and what they have to say. They've put together a fantastic email to me with attachments of videos and laws and regulations. So they're doing their homework. And as somebody who supports students with mental health, I think starting to have the conversation is important. That said, it might be done for us. There is a significant mental health bill at the state level, specifically targeting allowing X number of excused absences for mental health, and it's not tied to medical documentation. So that's some of the things that we're hearing. And I've known about this for a number of months, but we just discussed it today in our legislative committee meeting call. So.
Thank you for addressing all of that, and you're welcome for the segue. Thank you so much.
And a shout out to our history department for the civics project, because that is.
I am being bombarded with civics projects, and I love everything to do with it. I love everything.
We haven't gotten them. We got them last year, and they were really great.
The ideas are around mental health, the ideas around school safety, the idea around can we do sprucing up our middle school. I mean, these are our kids that are in these buildings every day. I love it, absolutely love it, and we plan to be active and do something about it.
All right, Chris, question about the handbook.
Yes, segue back. Question for clarification, and then just a general question that, because it was referenced here, but not actually about the handbook. So I noticed there were several instances of duplicate entries. I mean verbatim, like for example, with the damage to the Chromebook on page 19 and page 29. There's an instance on page 17 and 31 where it's like the exact same language and entry. Can you just speak to why the I mean,
Yeah,
I'm all for
absolutely.
tell them 5 different times and maybe they'll hear it once,
Absolutely. I think it goes back to Mr. Barbosa's question about do people actually read the handbook? And so
it's a test. I passed.
Although at the high school, we do have our parents, guardians, and students sign off that they've read the handbook. Now, whether or not that's true or not, that's for you and I to speculate about. But they sign off that they've read it all and that they understand it. We also hand them the handbook in a printed out agenda. But because they don't necessarily read it all the time, or they're not overly familiar with it, the idea that, and people don't necessarily always think in the same manner, oh, I'm looking for school-issued devices, where would I find that, right? So we might put it in multiple places so that, depending on how they sort of navigate there, they'll find it. And because, like I said, they don't necessarily read it all the way through, it gives them an opportunity to find it wherever it is they land.
Perfect. You just described my whole filing system, so yeah, thank you for that. Oh, look at that. I was just curious. I know that every year the school collects parking fees for students, and I understand that is probably more to ensure accountability of the student, to make sure that they adhere to sticking to one spot. And of course, there are more students and not enough parking spaces to go around, and so it's a way to ensure that the students who should have a parking space has them. What happens to that fee? That might be more of a superintendent question.
Yeah, typically any fee goes directly into a fee that would be called SHS parking fee. That's typically how they're set up. I don't know how ours is set up, so I'll look into it for you, but that's typically what happens. They're part of a revolving account, and they can only be used for the purposes of that parking lot.
So do we leverage those, do we collectively leverage those dollars like for paving or lining, or?
Could be used potentially for lining, could be used for a plow on one of our trucks if we're using it to clean that parking lot. I've had many years of experience with this topic in my last district, where literally that truck can only be used in that parking lot. if
Okay.
that's the way the language for the revolving account is noted. So if it says SHS parking lot, that's it. If it says school district parking lot, then you can make the argument that it could be used elsewhere. I'm not sure that politically that'd be a good idea for the record, but yeah, there could be things used for things like lining and all that. And sometimes you can, depending on how the article was originally written, you can tweak it to actually do something on the sidewalk. It all depends on how it was originally started, but I'll look into it for you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I was just curious. I'm like, I always pay this, but I never thought, like, where does this go? Awesome, thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome.
Lindsay, are there any questions? All right, thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate all
Very
the
welcome.
updates and the comments.
Thank
We're
you
gonna-
all.
Yes, thank you. We're going to vote on the handbooks at our next meeting. I believe not all the principals will be available next meeting, so if you have any questions or comments that come up in the meantime, if you'd send them to me, and we can get those answered for you by the next meeting. All right, next item on the agenda is the Joint Labor Management Committee recommendation for the Jones Early Childhood Center schedule. Dr. Beta, can you present the proposed?
Yeah, so
changes?
as you know, we had a number of labor management committees working on schedules and there's still one left at the elementary schedule that probably won't start until the fall, based on where we are this year. But this one is ready to go as a tentative agreement based on the school committee vote tonight, and the union will also do their vote per se. But what we're trying to do at the Jones Early Childhood Center is to really focus on, what's happening during our school day based on questions and items that have come up. So what you have is, effective this September, which you've already voted on fees, if you remember earlier, because it was so timely. We have 3 classrooms for 4 full days, 8:30 to 2:30, 3 classrooms, 5 half-days, morning and afternoon sessions, 8:30 to 11, and 12 to 2:30. And those fees are slightly different because of the amount of time. And the 2 self-contained classrooms are maintained. Now, the 2 Title I classrooms are also still continuing, but they're not part of the MOU because it's a federal grant that we get, and we're not going to put it into an MOU with labor. One key component that we're looking for is the training, the evaluation, the screening, the meetings, and the scheduling between the preschool as it pertains to the start of the school year, and it could also be the beginning, the elementary schools, but really on the back end, really looking at making sure that our placements as students are leaving the preschool and they're going to their sending school or a sending program, that we have clear communications and guidelines taking place with our staff. We currently, when I did my entry plan, in 2 of the buildings, I was specifically targeted on the idea of we not having those communications like we used to many years ago, and it's causing some stress because of student needs not being able to be addressed on day one. So that's the tentative agreement that's before you.
So to be clear, the preschool would start immediately the Monday following Labor Day instead of, as has been the practice recently, like the
Correct.
week after. But then they would end 5 days. There would be a space between the end of the preschool and the end of the rest of the district.
That is correct.
Would be lengthened up. Any questions or comments on the proposed schedule? Yes, Lindsay.
Yeah, so what is the current practice for this first day of school for preschool? I think you just said it, but I want to make sure I'm clear on it. Like, when is the first day of preschool compared to
I believe
K
it's
through 12?
the calendar, is it the Thursday? Do we do preschool K? It's on our calendar, I'll just take a look at it. I don't know it
Thank
off
you.
the top
Sorry,
of my head.
I should have looked at that prior.
Typically, it's either, from what I've seen in other districts, it's typically, districts either do K-12 right away, or they stagger K, then they stagger preschool again. So it's usually 3 days out from the start. So 1 to 12 is Wednesday, K is Thursday, Friday is pre-K, just as one example. But I will get you, should be on our calendar.
Point of order, it's in the handouts for the school
Thank
committee
you.
on the elementary school handout.
From
Thank
the,
you, Chris. I
you, boss.
appreciate that.
Thank you. Could you just note what it says?
September 7th, first day for preschool and kindergarten.
Okay, so
Compared to, what's it for?
To
that's where I'm going.
Sorry.
September 6th.
Yeah,
So it's just
the
one day.
Yep.
That's it, yeah.
So this potentially has us up to 5 days later.
Yeah, it's all about, it's all about trying to get the communication, the screening and everything. You gotta remember that the ability to have those last-minute screenings is it's very important to us to make sure that we're putting students in the right place. Same thing with students in the right place if they're, quote, a peer student, where the parents are paying. So that was the request for the extra time.
And when does that happen now?
All over the place, that's the problem.
Yeah.
We're doing screenings right now. We won't do any screening, more than likely any screenings throughout, and then we get bombarded right away at the beginning of the school year.
But it's built into the
Yeah,
school
but,
year.
and I think there was a request to get the current schedule, so I'll make sure that you have that.
Thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate that.
I have it as
And
my
then
note.
in terms of the 4-day, 5-day, so what we're doing is adding 5-day morning and afternoon sessions that are just new.
Yes.
In addition to the 4-day sessions that already exist and the grow.
And the Title
stuff
I.
that already exists in the Title I. Yeah, so this is like adding options for
Correct.
families.
Yes.
In addition to the adjustment to the beginning and into the school year that's been
And
proposed.
some of this is based on what we're hearing.
Yeah.
Now, will it work? We have to try it first to see if it really works to the benefit. Like I said earlier, it may be that it doesn't work exactly how we think we are because things are changing. I will tell you that many of the 5 days, the district I came from, I didn't have anything to do with this proposal. I wasn't at the table. I received it, but we've had 5 days, the 4 days, the full day programming, and we did see our numbers spike, including pay families.
Numbers of
Students
enrolled
participating,
students.
yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we average for a school district that's much smaller, we're at about, I believe you have your numbers enrollment. I'm going to be giving you a monthly enrollment form. I think it's in your packet by school. I apologize. It's this one here. You should have that. And you'll see that the preschool right now is at 153 students as of May 20th, up from 139 on lowest, 143 at the beginning of the year. These are still pretty low numbers for a district our size. I came from a district significantly smaller, and we were well into the 1-teens. So this is only another 30 or 40 students for a district that has about 2,400 more students. So the target area for us becomes that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
And then I have a,
Sure, yes.
sorry, just a question for the chair. I think what we did with the last 2 schedule proposals is we heard it at a meeting and then waited until the next meeting to vote. I think, is it possible to do that with this one? I think just to
I
give.
assume, yes, we don't
I'd
have a
like to-
deadline. I mean, we definitely need to do this one next meeting because that needs to be, they need to prepare for the school. But I think it's helpful to have families have a chance to do this. We have a few questions about the schedule. The 4 full days, those would be Monday. There's still the same 4 full days that they have.
Right. There's no scheduled changes. What I'm going to do is I'll take this memo, tentative, and I'm going to take the prior schedule so you can see them back to back and what they mean, and then I'll ask the questions on the screening and all that other pre-time, so on and so forth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
Armando, did you have a question or comment?
I just had a question about enrollment, actually.
Okay.
I was just wondering when in the year do we have a better idea of what the enrollment will be for September?
It's on, I can tell you right now, it's ongoing. It is almost every single day, our registration office. This morning, there's pretty tight in there in terms of people registering right away. I mean, we'll have a set number, if you will. We'll have like a number of, okay, we lost 200 and so X seniors. What does that mean for enrollment? And then this particular year, we also have, right off the bat, a high number of the migrant student situation. So does that mean we become a bigger kindergarten class than we've ever seen? We just don't know that yet. And it's my understanding that enrollment for things like kindergarten does happen a lot throughout the summertime. So we'll give you a number in June, kind of like, hey, this is what we know.
Yeah.
And any registrations. I will tell you that over 50 new home language surveys have taken place already with Dr. Quayle in just the last week.
Any other questions or comments on this? All right, is everyone okay with voting on this next meeting, unless we have a few more questions answered? All right, the next item on the agenda is the Wellness Committee update. We are getting close to the end. And over to Mr. Colantonio, and we have Ms. Gallen here as well.
I'm not really well known for being brief, but I'm going to be brief tonight. So two updates. One is going to be super quick, and then the next one is a policy recommendation. Nothing to be voted on this evening, just for your consideration of the committee. The first was just an update about some of the staff wellness things that we are doing, aside from promoting the staff wellness offerings that we see in the town, through the Y, or through the MIIA, which I always want to confuse with the MIAA. That's unfairly close, if you ask me, but I didn't make either one of them. And promoting wellness generally, as we always would. We added a couple of things this year that we think have worked pretty well. We started a staff wellness team. It's a group of SPS employees and community partners, all with either a background in wellness, a fondness for wellness, an expertise in wellness, or in one circumstance, someone who's just sort of an expert at fun, because a lot of these things that we try to do are just to have fun. And so we worked with the principals to do something I think a bit more than your token wellness monthly voluntary thing for employees. So we worked with every building principal to hijack one of their staff meetings. They have a monthly staff meeting. We took one over from every building to do a Wellness Wednesday. We kind of customized Wellness Wednesday to fit each school based on what they needed. And then we kind of also had a couple of things that we did with team building, with reconnecting teaching faculty with the joy they found in education, maybe when they started, if that's dwindled a little bit as the years have gone on. And we also just gave people license to have a little bit of fun, unwind, and do something a little bit different than a staff meeting. So that's been Wellness Wednesdays. We've gone to every school except for one. We have the Gibbons tomorrow. That's our last one.
Yeah.
They've gone pretty well.
They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm actually going to have Danielle Gallen come up to the table, because she's... I see them as trail running as being a big part of the Gibbons.
Yeah.
So I'd say they're all go for a run.
The other thing that we added was we added some offerings, voluntary free offerings for staff. This is really staff offering to staff. So we had wildly popular yoga at the high school. We had pickleball, also popular. I thought it sounded pretty cool, but not as popular, climbing wall. I don't know if that was too scary for people to do. Yes.
We're working on it.
Yeah, and trail running. So we're trying to offer some things in the realm of wellness for staff. Why? Because these things are just good for employees in general, full stop. But also, we definitely want to be a district that is keyed into wellness, putting a premium on wellness, and hopefully doing a good job with genuine staff wellness, because we want to be that district for folks to come to us and for good folks to stay with us. So we want it to be very connected to HR. So those things have been pretty fun this year to be a part of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the data shows us that a connected school community is a safer school community. So the more that we can tether the adults and the students to school, the healthier overall everyone is, the better attendance looks, both for staff and for students as well.
Yep, so that's staff wellness. I'll go right through to the wellness committee and the policy recommendations. I know it's late, so I'll try to be quick, and then we can get to questions. So the wellness committee, I am happy to report. As you know, the wellness committee is a representative group. It was 20 members representing every stakeholder we could possibly have in the school community, community partners, folks from health services, the world of counseling, parents. We had one great parent double dipper. She's a parent of a child going into 6th grade, but also a wellness coach in her own school system. That was kind of a double dip there. We had principal representation, physical education, health, counseling, athletics, student voice. We looked at data. I think we did what most healthy, robust wellness committees would do. We looked at data from the Student Youth Health Survey. We shared perspectives. We looked at our current policy. We looked at some policies from some other districts. I think one thing that we did that not every wellness committee would do is we worked with a wellness coach through DESE
wonderful coach named Allison from the Framingham Public Schools. And that wellness coach kind of looked at our current policy, conducted something called a WellSat assessment, which is a kind of industry standard best practice for reviewing wellness policies at the school level. Lots of things to look up and to research if you're into that sort of thing. But WellSat is what the DESE kind of relies on from their wellness coaches. And so the assessment of our current policy is in there. We'll go through that in a second, not in any great detail. I'll do it superficially, and then you can ask questions. But it didn't score great. It got some pretty low scores. But by the end of we had 4 meetings, lots of great conversation, good ideas. We shared, edited, revised, came together on this recommendation for you folks to consider. And by the end of our year, we were, not joking, this is a real thing, considered wellness champions because of our work with the wellness coach to improve the policy. So we got some free tickets to the John C. Stalker Institute of Food and Nutrition's Healthy Kids Program Summit. I think we had at least one representative go. From food services, Guy Kopp, who also was representative there. And so that's the report of the Wellness Committee. It was a great committee. It was very positive. I don't think people were bashful. They shared their perspectives, and I think the policy recommendation that we have for you is the result of our labor collectively this year. So it's a pretty significant update. And so it's not the type of update in the policy where I would give you a couple of phrases that have been changed. It's more substantial than that. So I will say that. It is yours to consider. The WellSat is only one tool to measure. But some of the highlights are as follows. So the layout of the sections is completely different. We had some pretty low assessment data in WellSat areas. We had one that was literally non-existent. I don't know if you looked at the bar graph or the scores that we got for nutrition education, but there is supposed to be a bar graph above nutrition education. We were 0 and 0, so we didn't have a bar graph. We would now if you accepted this policy. So the layout of the sections, very different. Based specifically in the WellSat areas, we knew we wouldn't miss anything if we just adopted the WellSat categories and made sure that our policy, though specific to Stoughton, absolutely, to what we do here in Stoughton, what's important to us, I hope you'll see that, also absolutely very directly addressed all those areas. The opening statement is much more brief and concise. It's an overarching statement of purpose. Nutrition education, clearly defined with nutrition education at all levels. That was not really existent in the policy. Nutrition programs and school meals. Our current policy actually did okay in this area. The language and references were updated and specific adequate meal times for students were included for each school. Competitive food and beverages is in the current policy as nutrition and wellness. It was updated and aligned to the most current standard. Physical education and physical activity. This is a big update, which might not seem like that big an update. So I want to tell you why it's a big update. So the Mass State frameworks were recently updated in what is the most significant upgrade to those frameworks that I ever remember in my 22 years in education. And they include wellness, mental health, personal safety. I'll give you some of the subcategories. Nutrition and balanced eating, mental and emotional health, healthy relationships, all age appropriate, of course. Physical health and hygiene, that's an old favorite of the middle school. And substance use and misuse, also appropriate by age level. So because that's such a substantial update and we're adopting those frameworks here, that might not seem like a big update in physical education and physical activity, but it really is. And then Section 5, wellness promotion and marketing. It's a very important element. How do you market wellness? How do you sell wellness as an idea to your student body, to your staff? How do you promote what you're doing with wellness? It wasn't really addressed in the current isn't really addressed in the current policy. And then Section 6, implementation, evaluation, and communication. These were important elements that were loosely addressed. They were a little bit all over the place in the current policy, so we streamlined them all into one section, and we included clear language regarding accountability for our group and our obligation to communicate to the school committee our work and recommendations. I enclosed a staff wellness flyer, so you can kind of see how that was promoted to staff and how we did signups. I did the staff, the district wellness scorecard for your current policy. We did get I'll say a raw first reading assessment of our recommended revision. I didn't want to presume to put that in there, or we're going back and forth a little bit because we think we should have scored higher in a couple of areas.
I was going for 100.
Yeah, we were going for 100.
Yes.
We didn't make any bones about trying to go for a perfect score with the WellSat. But I'll give you a couple of examples. In the bar graph there, we were 0 and 0 for nutrition education, and in our raw first reading, we're now a 100 and a 90. So not only would we have a bar graph there, but the blue would go all the way to the top, and the orange would go to 90. We improved in every area. I won't do them all, but I'll go to the bottom. You get 2 scores for the WellSat. They basically give you all your subcategories. So they give you a 0 if it's not there, a 1 and it's there, but it's not strong, and a 2 if it's strong. And so the 2 ratings that they give you your policy, one is on comprehensiveness. That's basically if it's there, if it's addressed in the policy at all. So they take your 1s and your 2s and they divide that by the number of subsections. And then your strength score is your number 2s, all your number 2s. So that's, you had it, is your comprehensive score. Your strength score is it strong in this area? So I will say that our new score, we went from total comprehensiveness 52, as you see it here. Our new total comprehensiveness score is a 99. We've decided we will accept the 99. We'll take it. Our total strength score is a 76, which is way up from 27. That's a huge improvement. We're not quite ready to accept a 76, so we're still working to get that a little bit higher. That is a subjective, really common, well-respected assessment for wellness policies, but it's not the end-all, be-all. I will say that, so that is still for your consideration. I think it's widely used and pretty widely accepted, but that's still really for your consideration. But I think if you did decide to adapt or adopt our recommended policy, I think, at least in terms of the WellSat score, and for Shirley, just updating and making everything more current, I think that it would be an improvement, but that is our humble recommendation, including your own representative, Chris Shannon, who did a great job on the Wellness Committee.
Chris, do you want to add anything to Mr. Colantonio, Ms. Collins' comments?
Where do I begin? No, absolutely. I think this was a very well-run committee. We had very ambitious leadership who had very high expectations. The committee was highly engaged. There was a lot of input and debate around a lot of these topics, and we tried to be as data-informed as possible. And we also tried to include student voice as much as possible through, we were going to do a survey, and then we realized, wait, we already collect health and wellness data from students. Maybe we should just do that instead of giving them survey fatigue. So we leveraged that data, which was very helpful. We did have a very brave student representative who attended all meetings, and the committee was very gracious in making sure that we allowed her some space to provide input where possible, and sometimes she would assert. I do get a sense that if there were more students, that the power dynamics at play might have allowed for a greater student voice. But I thought that was a great first step, and maybe something we should consider as we continue to move forward as a committee. And I love that the resulting recommendation in terms of the policy are inclusive of all those discussions, well constructed in a way that I feel is actually, it's longer, but it's easier to follow than the old policy. It's data informed, but it also aligns with state standards and expectations in a way that's very easy to do an apple-to-apple comparison. So, but I did major kudos to the leadership. The meetings, as you can imagine, were as much fun as they were engaging.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee on this? Amanda?
Two questions are probably out of the control of the committee. First is because we have students of different sizes, I was wondering if there were any discussion among the committee for the amount of food a student would be able to consume in the cafeteria.
Yeah, I don't know if the size, I don't remember the size of the students coming up, but I know that there was definitely talk about students getting what they need at mealtime, and all students getting what they need in every way.
So if a 6-foot athlete wanted a second meal at lunchtime, are they able to get it?
I don't know if that's covered in the scope of our policy.
I know.
But the policy would say that they should get what they need for healthy nutrition. So just to show you how a policy might inform practice, if that were decided that we needed to do something for larger students because the portions were too small, the policy would support that.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, this is really just crafting the policy. It's then up to the district to ensure that the policy is followed. And maybe something for the committee to consider as we think about accountability and evaluation is updating the school committee on a regular basis in terms of what that practice looks like and whether we feel that the policy is being followed appropriately, to ensure that the intentions of the wellness committee are being played out in the on-the-ground practice within our schools.
And the second question, which is probably out of control also, allergies, food allergies, and kids. Any discussions on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
We definitely had discussions on that. I don't know if we want to take this one, Danielle, but we definitely had discussions on that. And similarly, the policy is like the 40-foot up goals that you have, and then your practices and procedures can be supported by them. So for us, it would be about having sort of a safe environment to eat, and then you could talk about what that means, a safe environment to eat, whether it's, I know allergies are one of those polarizing ones, but whether that means, the allergen is never let in the building at all, or whether students learn to sort of live safely with items, in a safe way that's age appropriate. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, I'm curious, more detailed,
So that would
peanuts.
be a protocol and not a policy. So that comes down to best practice and actual protocol that is followed throughout the school district, which is the same in every building. So we have a lot of continuity there and not specific policy,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
I know a lot of schools have a no peanuts policy.
And unfortunately,
So-
data doesn't necessarily support that, and nor does removing all allergens from every space create a safer environment. The data actually will show you that it creates a false sense of security. So by making sure that all of our staff are trained in epinephrine administration every single year, every staff member, it's a lot of work on the nursing end, but it creates a safer environment. And ensuring that our Power School is up to date with anything that's life-threatening, and that includes life-threatening food allergies. And there are much scarier ones than peanuts that children and staff are affected by. But our job as educators and as clinicians is to educate. And so if I create a situation where all of the risk is potentially removed, I'm creating a false sense of protection rather than educating the staff and the student and the family on how to best support that child and that adolescent and then that young adult in the world. Because the allergens are not removed in any space outside of school. Does that make sense?
It does. It's just that, as I think I've said before, more important than education is the safety of a child. So looking at it in that view, and everyone in the school system, probably including us in the school committee, want the best education for the children. But I would tend to, I think everyone would agree, beyond that, it's safety of a child. And I was wondering if the committee had any discussions on that. And I understand your point that the education teach them how to perhaps avoid or control or the washing of hands out in the real world or something else. But I'm really talking about inside the school.
Yeah, so it's the same, it's the same, right? And so it's the education of the adults and the child. So we have to be aware of the allergen or whatever it is that an individual can come in contact with, that they would have a reaction and have best practice put in place. And that doesn't, that by no means would ever include removing or saying that that food item is not allowed in a classroom or in a school building, because that the data does not support that that creates the safest environment. The safest environment is created by educating the individual on how to recognize their allergen, how, and we teach kids not to share food. There's specific seating arrangements for kids with life-threatening allergies. It's not an allergen-free table because the data also does not support that. And it's really evolving with what's best practice in keeping kids safe. So as the clinicians and as the adults, that's our job, but education is in their allergy or in their health condition is a major part of that. And there's a lot of work that goes into it, both at the classroom level, family level, and school level.
And this also applies to special ed children, which they may not be able to control their environment as well with themselves. So the goal is not to keep the food that may cause an allergic reaction away from them, but to educate them.
So it's to really educate the adults around them, right? Those that, and that child to their greatest ability. I've had some very interesting cases outside of the school district where, based on multiple layers of diagnoses where, kids had some life-threatening allergies, that they would seek out certain foods based upon taste and not understanding their allergen, and seeing how very specialized areas control that and educate around that is interesting. And I think that we do a fabulous job at making sure that the educators in the classroom are highly aware of what the child's needs are, whether it's making sure that, kiddos are seated at, a certain end of a table and then other kids aren't. And health and special ed work very, very closely together to ensure that our most vulnerable students are safe in school.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is a very interesting discussion, right? Because the ebb and flow of this discussion has completely come full circle. If you remember, in discipline, we had zero tolerance, right? Just kids get suspended all the time. We've learned that didn't work. And now we're looking more at restorative justice. It's interesting that in this particular area, the protocols are what's the most important part. And the protocols in Stoughton that we're lucky to have is that we're able to have a comprehensive, highly educated leader who, like we said earlier, we're training constantly. The district I came from, it was the total opposite perspective, if that makes any sense. So we were still creating spaces of peanut-free classroom, peanut-free chairs, desks, all that kind of stuff. So I think this is an ebb and flow of, and then when it comes to the specialized classrooms, as an example, for those students that the learning is more difficult on something around that, that's again all about the adults. I've been in some of those classrooms where we have students that are grabbing anything into their mouth, never mind food. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Does anybody have any other questions about the policy? Yes, Karen.
So I think this is very exciting stuff, by the way, just the addition of this. Under Part 2, where it says nutrition programs and school meals, and then at the very beginning, it says sustainable food practices and environmentally friendly practices, including locally grown and seasonal foods, school gardens.
Yeah.
So this is something that you're considering implementing here in Stoughton, is locally grown and maybe even school gardens that will be used in the school lunch program?
Yeah, so I'm glad.
That's amazing.
Well, I'm glad that you asked that, because this policy is like our ambitious goal. Yes, we would like for that to be happening. Now, can Mr. Kopp do a school garden for every school in September? Probably not, but that's still our goal. I think even if that started in pockets, when I was the principal at OMS, we had a little garden in our courtyard. We grew purple carrots. Yeah, we grew purple carrots. We used them in some. So I think that it's more of, this is our ambitious goal, and this is what we would like to do, and not every school needs a school garden in September 2024. So yes, it is exciting, but it is also, we want to get there.
Well,
And that's,
Mr. Kopp does source locally grown foods wherever he can. And prior to the pandemic, where I think so many things shifted, and I feel like we're coming back full circle from there, we did have a pizza garden at the Wilkins, I believe, where they were growing basil and tomatoes. And so things like that, where you're getting the community and the parents involved and the kids, to show them where your food comes from, but get them excited about growing food as well, I think is really important.
Yeah. I'd like to point out that the new elementary school, should it go through, has a garden plan for it. So that is an important part of this. It's right off the STEM lab. So that is part of the education plan that was put forward. Kristen.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, as you consider staff wellness opportunities, one thing that I did not see, it was all kind of physical activity based. So to be inclusive and also to think about mental health, getting their hands into the dirt might be a really great staff project.
yeah, great idea.
So you might want to think about kind of weaving those together.
In the interest of time, what were the next steps or the recommendations? Mr. Ford, I know you've been our policy expert for this.
Generally, the draft policy will be referred to the policy working group for review, and that group would then bring it forward to the committee.
Does that make sense for everyone? Okay.
Just
All
a
right,
recommendation.
So, yes, all right. So we're going to refer that to policy working group, which right now is Armando and me, and then we'll bring that back to the committee. Again, if you have any comments or questions, you can always forward that to me. Let's move on to the next few items. Thank you, Ms. Gallen. The next few items we'll be able to check them off fairly quickly. Next is the skipping one. The Stoughton Extended Day lease removal, lease renewal. Sorry, my tongue is getting tired. This is a pretty standard contract. We see this every year from the Stoughton Extended Day program, which offers pre and post-school care for a number of students. Dr. Baggett, any comments?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. As you can see, this has been on the back burner for quite a while because of some of our meetings. But this is a very traditional, already pre-approved process that you've gone through many years ago with your legal counsel. The contract has not changed. It's a 2% increase, which is the traditional that you've been doing for a number of years. We will, down the road, have to take a look at custodial coverage. That'll be an area, not in this current year for this contract that you could potentially approve tonight, but in the future, because that rate's been set since 2013. So it's, that was a great look.
That was actually going to be my
that
question.
That made me laugh pretty good inside. Like,
if we needed to re-examine the custodial after
Yeah, this program does a lot for our families, as you know, and it's, without it, it's very difficult, it would be very difficult. These programs, some of them are closing all over the place, and I think we have to continue doing what we're doing. It seems to be working, so why rock the boat right now? I wouldn't, but it's your decision as a contractor.
I just want to point out that the buildings that would be hosting the after-school program next year would be the Daw and the Hanson.
Yep.
And then the before-school programs are at all
Yeah,
schools.
and I probably wouldn't recommend an extension, well, after June 11th, I wouldn't necessarily say let's do a 3-year extension contract, because we don't know where we're going to be with the potential of a new building opening up, and I think they would be fine with that.
Okay. All right, can I have a motion to, I guess, approve the agreement of lease? Sure, question, sure.
Just a quick question. Thank you for this. Understood most of it. Can you just very briefly explain quiet enjoyment?
I can get you an answer for that if you'd like, but off the top of my head, I believe that the section, I know what you're referring to because.
Yeah, it's page 3, number 10. That just
More or
threw
less
me, and
don't
I had
harass 'em.
no idea what they were talking about there.
And I'm going to tell you that I'm not going to try to give you an answer I don't have.
Perfect.
But I will absolutely look at it.
Works for me.
Yeah. And
All right.
I can move that we approve the Stoughton extended day lease for the 24-25 school year, starting August, 30th? 31st, 2024, through August 30th, 2025.
All right, so that motion was made by Lindsay. Is there a second? Second. All right, seconded by Chris. Motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All right, that motion has been carried 5-0. The next is the non-resident employee program. Dr. Bayeda?
Thank you, Madam Chair, to you and the rest of the committee. Since 2006-2007 school year, the program called the Employee Benefit for Non-Resident Employee Benefit Program, has been in place since 06-07. And the material fee is currently $1,500 per student. There's an attached summary of numbers for you to see that it is utilized, and the numbers fluctuate, as you can imagine. And the recommendation is that we continue this, as that it does support our employees that do not reside in the community.
And just to clarify, this is for Stoughton Public Schools employees.
Stoughton Public School employees, that is correct.
Any questions or comments on the non-employee resident program?
I think just,
Lindsay,
sorry, just to, I think just if we look at the past 6 years or so, this hovers between 2 and 5
Right.
students, so it's a pretty small number, and I think that, it's a benefit we can offer that is appealing to employees while also not putting a huge demand on limited classroom space, so I think that's, just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, and
This is the difference between this and school choice, where school choice would be opening up to potentially dozens of
Yeah.
students. This is really only a small handful. And most of them are in the elementary school. We get the occasional middle school.
Yeah.
Sorry, Armando?
I think you've answered my question.
All right. All right, can I have a motion to just approve or continue?
So moved.
Okay. All right, I should finish that. So motion to continue offering the non-resident employee benefit program.
So moved.
Okay. That was made by Chris,
Second.
seconded by Lindsay. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, that's been carried 5-0. Financial warrants, we're going to table because I don't have the list of the warrants at the moment. That brings us to the acceptance of minutes from April 23rd, 2024. At this time, I'd like to ask for any minutes from the April 23rd meeting.
I just have a really small one that,
Sure.
also in attendance on the first page, Katrina Crowley is spelled Crowley. And I actually should check to see if it appears anywhere else, but I think that was it. I think that's it.
Any other? Yes, Chris?
I have one. Just a quick one under, on the very last page, under next meeting. Can we just update that so it says May 28th for consistency?
Sure. At the time, the 21st was the
I-
next meeting, but it is.
understood,
yes. We've been shifting the schedule
I
around.
just don't want
Okay.
anyone to say like, boy, such an open law violation. I just completely missed the meeting altogether, you know?
Right. Any other amendments, corrections, additions?
Motion to approve the April 23rd, 2024 regular school committee meeting minutes as amended.
All right, that motion was made by Lindsay. A second?
Second.
Second by Armando. It's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm abstaining because I was absent for part of that.
Aye.
So that motion is carried 4-0 to 1. Moving on to school committee policy, the working group for policy met earlier this month to review another set of policy recommendations. We have actually going to put a pause because we have a whole slate that we will discuss next meeting. We put forward 3 for review at this meeting. This is just informational. This is the first reading. These are all existing policies with some language updates and updated legal references. So we won't discuss them tonight, but the one I wanted to pull out from the huge batch that we have is the, for discussion tonight and possible voting, is EFE, the Civil Rights Complaint Policy for Child Nutrition Programs. This is a new policy that is required. So I wanted to pull it out for discussion and vote for tonight. So if you would turn to EFE. Questions or comments on this policy?
This is just a new legally required policy?
Yes.
Like, what's that about?
So, this is a story. This is one of those fallouts. So this is legally required. It comes out of a Supreme Court case, and I think we cracked which one it is. It's a 2022 case, the HHC versus Talveski, which was actually involved in nursing home patients claiming that their civil rights had been violated in the way they were treated. And as a result of the ruling on this case, the Supreme Court ruled that if any sort of safety net program, and the child nutrition program counts as a safety net program, Medicare was the one involved in the original ruling. If they receive federal funds, they have to protect their legal rights and allow you to challenge them if you feel that they have been violated. So nobody's going around violating children's civil rights via the nutrition program, but we have to put it in as a result of the civil court case. So one of those interesting, like, something comes and then all the pieces fall in place. So that's why we have to put this in. And this is written with the legal reference based on that and coming out of that. Mr. Ford, I don't know if you have anything to add for.
No, the most interesting piece was you actually discovering the court case.
Yeah. That was me being like, I was like, what are people doing to children? Like, how can you violate someone's civil rights with the child lunch program? Like, what are you doing? I really wanted to know, and it turns out it's actually the result of this. So there are some notes at the bottom. This actually means that Mr. Colantonio, as our civil rights person, would set this up and figure out all the pieces that needed to fall in place once we approve this. So, any other questions or comments? This is kind of a weird one, but
It's pretty table
Right.
determined in terms of the information.
right. So, we can send this back for discussion, or we can vote tonight. This would be a simple approval of this one. So, can I have a motion to approve policy EFE?
Do we want
I'd
to?
make a motion to approve policy EFE as written.
All right. And that was made by Chris. A second.
Second.
All right, seconded by Armando. Any other questions, comments, debate?
Do we have to approve it tonight, or would it make sense to keep it with the others and approve it at the next meeting just for consistency, or?
We could.
Not trying to-
I just wanted to get it off our plates. We had one less thing to do.
Gotcha. I mean, if it's straightforward and if it's legally required, then I guess it makes sense.
Exactly.
Sorry,
This
I will
seemed
stop
like
slowing
There
this
was
down.
nothing to really discuss
Yeah.
other than why we had to do this.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
all right.
And you looked up a court case.
Yes, and I looked up a court case, so. So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, that's been carried 5-0. We're almost towards the end, I promise. The next is the budget and articles. Town meeting voted to approve the FY25 Town of Stoughton budget, with our budget passing as presented on May 15th. And they voted to approve our three articles on May 22nd. Big thank you to Dr. Bayetta for sitting in the hot seat and presenting both. Thank you again to town meeting for all of your support for the schools. We're still awaiting the final FY25 budget from the state. The state Senate's Chapter 70 SOA funding proposal was identical to that of the House Ways and Means. But unlike the House of Representatives proposal, they did not fully fund special education circuit breaker. So please fully fund special education circuit breaker. So we won't know the final Chapter 70 SOA funding and all that until probably after July 1st. Dr. Beta, anything else to add
No,
about
I
the
just
budget?
have, so that you know, we'll be doing notifications by June 14th of any layoffs with some of the positions that we still are laying off from the original vote. I'm hoping to come to you with recommendations on the 18th to recall a couple of those positions based upon available funding that's become available. So I'll chart that out for you, give it to you, and then potentially that stops. And of course, it's your priority, right? It's the committee's decision on the recommendation. You can up it or down it. But we have one creative way to resolve a student support issue with a late bus for secondary to the revolving account that still has money in it. We did have the resignation of a administrative position, and I don't see that being currently funded, so that opens up some further funding around potentially the nurse situation. I don't really think that with the amount of money that is, that right now we can do anything with the kindergarten paraprofessionals, but we'll continue to look at that, and we have some thoughts where some of those folks won't necessarily be laid off. They have bumping rights, but we have to follow the protocols. And then technologies and materials and supplies, professional development, those all become, we're already hiring for next year, those positions that are available. Mr. C's done a great job with the principals to get that started. And we're going to have some push. I think we have 36 kindergarten enrollments from the 2 shelters alone. So that number is going to lead us to have to make some critical decisions around another classroom, or or getting some definitive decision from the state. Getting some definitive decision from the state on is it for all the students we're getting money, just the new ones that are enrolling? Is it a combination of both? Because that could give us the information that we need to make sure we keep these positions with the increase in the class sizes and the issues. So it's going to be a real yin and yang for a while, in my opinion, especially because the budget isn't even done yet.
Any
Thank
questions? Yes, any budget articles. Town meeting's almost done, so hopefully we'll be able to say that's done and dusted, so that will be done. Other matters, the Stoughton High School graduation is Thursday, June 6th at 5:30 at the high school. Hopefully weather's good and we can be outside. If not, it'll be in the gym.
Class night and awards night, too.
Oh, it's class night and awards night. When is that?
So awards night, according to my calendar, is...
You guys, I should be asking you guys.
Awards night is...
I don't remember anything off the top of my head, it's all on my calendar.
I have, I have scholarship night Sunday at 4.
Okay, scholarship night Sunday at 4.
Sunday at 4, and then I have class night 5:30 on Tuesday the 4th.
Okay.
And then we have graduation on Thursday the 6th at 5:30. Please report at 4:45.
Yes.
So you can get
There's a
some.
sports night.
And there's a
Monday.
sports night on, I don't have that one. I have the fine arts at the Gibbons Festival on June 3rd.
There is a sports awards.
I'll look forward to. And then there's also
Yeah, that's
town
the
meeting
That's
tomorrow
Monday.
night.
Tomorrow night, yes, okay, Monday. And another graduation, we have the invitation, we've invited to the Stoughton Academy graduation on Tuesday, June 11th at 6 p.m. and the Stoughton High School graduation. For those unfamiliar with Stoughton Academy, we talked about it earlier in the meeting, but it offers residents of Stoughton and surrounding communities who are not currently in high school the opportunity to earn their high school diploma, not a GED, but an actual high school diploma. So it's great to celebrate that because this is a different cross-section.
June, thank you to Mr. Pickett. He must be watching. Monday, June 3rd is Sports Awards at 6:30.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yes. So a lot of great senior events coming up, a lot of graduation events. Several of us are participating in the DAW Community Reader Day next Tuesday, June 4th.
I'm on that
So, yes, I'll see some of you there. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend the Wilkins one on April 24th, so maybe next year. Any other correspondence?
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
It's not correspondence,
Yes.
but at the last meeting with the high school schedule change, we talked about putting together a student survey before the end of the year about like what do students need as we're transitioning to a long block schedule and just like making sure that we're thinking about that over the summer. I just wanted to check in and see like who can I talk to about doing that? Like who can I work with?
That would be
to
the,
get
high-
that off
that
the
would be
ground.
that would be the high school principal.
Okay. And-
Unless Julie's made has a designee working on it. I can
Okay.
ask tomorrow.
Can we find out if there's progress, and then if not, I'm happy to like help with that.
And I'll make sure you're on my email to her.
Thank you.
That way you get the response right
Awesome.
away.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
All right, our next meeting is Tuesday, June 18th. Note the date change. There are some calendars that have a different date on them. 7 PM here in the school committee conference room. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, made by Lindsay, second. Seconded by Chris. Motion's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, the meeting is adjourned at, what time is it? Oh my goodness, 10:19. Thank you all for staying. Congratulations to all graduates. Best wishes for the end of the school year. Thank you for coming, and good night.
You're asking.